печеньку у зеленому саду. Чи не вийде дівчинонька рано вранці по ладу? Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала. Вийшла дівчинонька рано вранці воду брать, а за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнява, як дівчина саду ягоди рвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Future sun.
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1047 of the news. And it is the Sunday night Fundraiser stream. It's good to see you all once again. And we have massive news tonight. Of course, you've probably already heard Ukraine has launched another new full-scale invasion of Russia's Kursk region. The Russian troops are taking heavy losses, and also Iran's launching a military action in their western part of the country, also as we speak. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news of the war in Ukraine, and also some news from around the world. But today's focus is primarily going to be inside of the Ukraine war, as we have been able to hear that a major offensive has been conducted by the armed forces of Ukraine in the past 24 hours within the Kursk region that has seen a significant amount of advances and also a high amount of losses being taken by Russian Federation armed forces within the area. At this moment, the offensive has been wildly successful, to the point that while we do not know the exact depth of the Ukrainian advance at this time, the Russian Federation has announced a mandatory evacuation of an area 15 miles deep from the front lines, showing that it appears that a front-wide collapse may be happening at this very moment. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that within inside of the Ukrainian lines in this area, we have also seen a larger amount of Western equipment being dedicated to the offensive, and it does appear that at this moment, North Koreans were also involved in the defense on the Russian side within the area around Bolshoi-Zolotskoy, and according to U.S. sources, nearly an entire North Korean battalion has been lost in the past 48 hours in the fighting leading up to the offensive and the offensive as it has gone down so far, showing that the North Koreans have now lost effectively about another 8% of all fighting forces that have been sent from North Korea and into the Russian Federation to fight on their behalf. Meanwhile, heavy fighting has also been occurring around other areas of the front lines, as Ukrainian forces have been able to reclaim a small area just to the southwest of Ivanivsky and a limited counteroffensive conducted by the Ukrainian defending garrison at the town of Chasiv Yar. We have also been able to see heavy combat activity happening within the areas around the Kremena forest and also around Seversk as well, as Ukrainian forces continue to hold heavy defensives, and not only that, conduct a limited counteroffensives on Russian forces within these areas. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that outside of Ukraine and inside the Russian Federation, major missile attacks have been occurring once again on Russian military infrastructure around the area of Taganrog, as air defense has been filmed today in action, once again attempting, in a very vain attempt, to try and take out Ukrainian incoming long-range drones. We have also been able to see a whole bunch of other interesting information coming out as well around the world, as we have been able to hear that NATO naval presence surveillance within the Baltic is going to be greatly heightened now due to the fact that Russian vessels operating on behalf of the Russian Federation could be impromptu saboteurs, once again trying to sabotage critical infrastructure that is in vital function to NATO security within this northern region of the alliance. We have also been able to hear that inside the Middle East, the last Russian submarine based out of Tartus has left the port today and was photographed lacking in 4K Ultra HD by a Portuguese submarine as it was leaving the port of Tartus. We were also able to hear of a military exercise being conducted by the Iranians, with the Israelis now on high alert, as usually these military exercises are a lead up to some sort of action by the Iranians against the state of Israel, usually some form of a cover-up for that action. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that the Republic of China has given an emergency statement today as a supposed Chinese vessel appears to have drug its anchor, or more so drug its nuts, across a major telecommunications line at the bottom of the Pacific and has severed it today, which has been a vital communications network in between the United States of America and the nations of the Far East that are within our sphere, including the state of Japan, the Republic of Korea, and the Republic of China. Taiwan is now requesting international intervention in this investigation to see if the Chinese were responsible for the severing of this vital communications link. But nevertheless, we have loads of news to cover today. An absolutely high amount, mind you. I actually have to say, it's a huge day in news just because of what's happening inside of Ukraine.
Another historical day, that is. Like, this was crazy. You know what's crazy about this whole situation, Enforcer, is I actually made a video 5 days ago actually predicting this happening. And we went over all the intel indicating that Ukraine would launch this offensive back into Kursk once again. And if you go back 5 days ago, you'll see it on the video. We predicted it yet again, and it happened before January the 7th. So the prediction came true, and there it was today in bold fashion.
And once again, the Enforcer channel was dead on the analysis, right on time. Incredible stuff. Not tooting our own whistle, but this time we certainly are. But beyond that, very good stuff to see and very good stuff to hear as well. But moving on from that, I do want to make sure, before we get into the rest of the stream, that we do remind everyone that tonight is a Sunday night fundraiser night. And tonight's fundraiser is for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit that helps out wounded Ukrainian soldiers that have been wounded in the line of service in this very war that we're watching right now. Your support to this fundraiser tonight could actually help a Ukrainian soldier to walk again, to talk again, to be able to have a prosthetic arm or a leg, to be able to carry on their normal function, because they have nearly given everything but their lives in the defense of Ukraine and the greater Western world. And of course, any support or help that y'all could give to Revive Soldiers of Ukraine will be helping those Ukrainian soldiers out in a massive and profound way that really no other nonprofit is able to help out, at least in that specific category, like Revive Soldiers of Ukraine does. And so I hope that everyone gives a massive amount of support. Our goal is $2,500 tonight, and hopefully, I know that we will reach that goal, but hopefully we can go well beyond that goal and into even higher marks of support for Revive Soldiers of Ukraine and helping them out in this current war effort. But moving on from that and into the major news that we were able to get out of the Kursk oblast today, things did not go well for the Russian Federation. Things have gone horrifically. Poorly, I might add. It's certainly looking like a long-lasting defeat, as I almost cough right there. But beyond that, the offensive did begin by Ukrainian armed forces today, and it was preceded, very interestingly, by a heavy amount of electronic warfare, or EW warfare, as they like to call it for the abbreviations. I was trying to figure out how to say that. This is a post by Fighter Bomber, which many of y'all know is the guy who's famous for saying eternal flight whenever a Russian helicopter or a plane is shot down in friendly fire instance. But most importantly, in this post today, he's actually speaking about how Russian bombers have been very incapable, and also Russian artillery support has been very incapable as well, apparently due to an electronic warfare system being deployed by the Ukrainians that is so strong it is pretty much jamming everything that works on an electronic level within the area, and is causing most of the Russian Federation's fire support missions to be largely ineffective or impossible to launch. This is a very significant thing, and this also leads us to believe that there are a couple of other things behind the scenes that could be reasonable assumptions based off of this information today. Generally, Ukraine does have a fairly eclectic, I guess you could say, amount of electronic warfare systems that have been dedicated by the West to the armed forces of Ukraine so that way they can use them in the war effort. However, we've never really seen any that are incredibly large or incredibly powerful that have been publicly donated by Western nations like the United States of America or the United Kingdom or the Federal Republic of Germany. We haven't seen any of those systems, the extremely strong variety that can cover an entire major region like this, being given. So for this reason, I'm going to say, and I'm going to go out on a limb here on the analysis, that the Ukrainians have been given by some country, who knows which one in the Western world, an insanely strong and powerful electronic warfare jamming system that has been deployed in the area of Kursk and is used in a very limited amount of time, only at key moments. We don't ever hear of strong electronic warfare jamming systems being used on a daily basis, but we have heard in very select times in the past major electronic warfare activities happening at very key moments of the conflict, especially over last year in 2024. And one of the biggest times that happened was during the initial Kursk offensive, where the Russian Federation claimed that there was absolutely no way for them to conduct any major fire support or air support missions because of some sort of a major electronic warfare jamming presence within the area. After the first 3 days of the offensive, it appears that electronic warfare jamming ability that the Ukrainians had disappeared, and the Russian Federation was then able to call in a greater deal of fire support to a greater rate of effectiveness, but at the same time, it was not as effective as it could have been by that point because the element of surprise had already been achieved by the Ukrainians, and they were able to secure themselves a large foothold within 72 hours. However, now with the beginning of a second offensive, the Ukrainians are now once again whipping out some sort of a very strong electronic warfare system that is messing with everything that works on the electromagnetic sphere. It's apparently spanning all the way back to the city of Kursk itself. At least that's what we're hearing at the moment, because a large amount of Su-34s dropped their glide bombs approximately 50 miles away from their actual target. So going off of that, this is the affected radius of the electronic warfare system at a minimum, because we're being told that the Su-34s are not able to drop off their glide bombs, and they're not able to have a high rate of success. So this electronic warfare system, whatever it is extremely powerful. It has a very long range. And I saw someone say an EMP. Absolutely not, because electronics are still working. It's just that they're jammed and a lot of their systems are not really functioning properly. An EMP completely knocks out and fries electronics. An electronic warfare jamming system only makes their function a lot more difficult or a lot more gargled. So this is certainly not an EMP. But beyond
And
that,
also, the only way to generate an EMP would be to, detonate a nuclear weapon, wouldn't it?
pretty much in the modern day, yes. Like we have a special plane that we designed that could create an electromagnetic pulse, but it is a 747. So it's not really like the Ukrainians
yeah.
just randomly flew up a commercial airliner with this giant bulbous thing on the nose, fired it at the Russians, blanketed the entire Kursk oblast for the entirety of the day, from what we're hearing, without the Russians seeing this aircraft or trying to shoot it down. So all of that is completely out of the window. Like, there's no way that is an electromagnetic pulse that was created. It is it's jamming on the electromagnetic spectrum. That's how electronic warfare works. So what it does is it disrupts electromagnetic transmissions, or really the entirety of the electromagnetic sphere, which makes it a lot more difficult for electronics to be able to function properly. There usually will be errors in the computation inside of computer systems, or a complete breakdown of the computer system's functions as a whole, which is why, of course, in modern day militaries like in the United States, we don't lean entirely on computerized systems. We still train people how to work off of analog systems, or we train them how to work off of basic mathematical computations done by hand, because these kinds of electronic warfare jamming systems are wildly effective, like we're seeing in Ukraine right now. We still don't know what system is being used inside of Kursk at the moment. It may actually be inside of Sumy on the Ukrainian side of the border. We don't really know yet, but this is still a very significant advantage that Ukraine is able to pull out of the woodworks whenever needed and just turn the thing on at critical moments, and the Russian Federation loses a lot of their fighting abilities. Another reason why I would believe that this is most likely a system that has been given to Ukraine in secret is that the Ukrainians use this in very limited amounts of time, in very specific and important moments. They're not giving the Russian Federation a lot of time to be able to figure figure out how this electronic jamming is actually working, because every single time it's turned on, it's at a point of I guess you could say inflection. It's at a point where the battle is its strongest. So no one really has enough time to be gathering intelligence or information about how the jamming is actually working or figure out where that system is. It turns on during a key moment, and then it turns off before anyone can really figure out much about it or how it's working. So with that in mind, this has been a major advantage for the Ukrainians today on this battlefield. However, that is not to undermine the success of the ground forces that have been achieving a great deal of success in the direction of Bolshoi Soldatskoy. Bolshoi Soldatskoy is the major bulwark of the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, a supposedly elite trained infantry unit of the Russian Navy that has been sent from Sevastopol inside of Crimea and all the way up into the area of Bolshoi Soldatskoy to effect the defense of the oblast against the Ukrainian forces that it invaded during the latter part of last year. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade is one of the few units in the Russian armed forces that actually has been a part of the Ukrainian story since it began in 2014. I'm going to pull this all together. This is like a giant plot bombshell when we throw it out, but the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade was the brigade that annexed Crimea in 2014. It was the sole unit that actually drove straight out of Sevastopol and right up into the area around the Armyansk and Chunhar Gap and took the entire peninsula and then annexed it the next day. That was the unit that actually did it. So they took the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade from Sevastopol and have relocated them now to continue their own story in the war, in a sense that's been going on now for 11 years. And now they are up in the area of Bolshoi Soldatskoy. And they've been having a rough time as it is throughout the entirety of this offensive. Many people said that the 810th was elite, it's naval infantry, and not only that, if you know anything about Soviet military history, it's Black Sea naval infantry. I mean, these guys are supposed to be the elite of the elite. These guys are the best of the best, at least according to the Russian military lore of a sort, or their history, more for the fact. And they are supposed to be the ones that not only can hold down the line, but conduct a counteroffensive and break through the Ukrainian lines. But over the course of the past few months, we have never seen that actually happen. The 810th Naval Infantry Brigade has taken significant losses fighting the Ukrainians, has gained very little in the amount of counteroffensives, and not only that, it seems to be logistically and armored, in terms of armor, inadequate to the current fighting situation. And we have now seen that the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade is the father or parent unit for the North Korean Expeditionary forces that are currently within the area of Bolshoi Soldatskoy and out towards the direction of Kromsky-Byky as well. We largely see that whenever the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade conducts any actions on the battlefield at all, they're usually accompanied at this point by the North Koreans, or the North Koreans are supported by the 810th, showing that the units are heavily intertwined. However, that did not help out today at all, and I'm actually going to show y'all a little bit of the clips that we got of what was going on in the area. We were able to see that the Ukrainians were able to advance quite rapidly already, and we were able to see some footage of that from the Corn group right here. I mean, you see them advancing through the town. This town is near to the direction of Bolshoi Soldatskoy. This is showing forward movement by Ukrainian forces, showing that they are successfully advancing against Russian defensive elements near to the major anchor point on the line at Bolshoi Soldatskoy, and this may be threatening Bolshoi with encirclement, or they may have already started to engage the 810th at Bolshoi and push them out. Once again, due to operational security, we most likely will not know the exact details of the Ukrainian advance until about 24 to 48 hours beyond this point. So while we are seeing some preliminary footage, this is from very early on in the offensive, most likely only a few hundred yards or less than 1,000 yards away from the Ukrainian starting point in the offensive. But we can clearly see them moving through this village unopposed at this point. Russian forces apparently have already abandoned the village by the time this clip was made by the Corn group. But moving on from that, we were also able to see some other interesting things happening as well, which was letting us know that the offensive was going wildly well for the Ukrainians and very poorly for the Russians. The Russians immediately started to order, about 2 or 3 hours after the offensive began, a mandatory evacuation for the entirety of the Bolshoi Soldatsky district, which is surrounding Bolshoi Soldatskoy. This district goes all the way back to the E38 highway. All the way back here. So let me measure to y'all how deep this evacuation order is. It is around 20 miles deep. That is a massive swath of area that is now being mandatorily evacuated. This has very rarely been done during the entirety of the Kursk offensive. We've seen that mandatory evacuations were given to the area around Giri. We've seen that mandatory evacuations were given to the area around Koronivo, but it's because these areas were rapidly advanced onto by Ukrainian forces, and then they engaged in combat and appeared to be nearly taking these towns. The Russians have only issued mandatory evacuations when the situation appears to be unsalvageable, and it looks as though the Ukrainian armed forces are going to be advancing practically unopposed up until there is some sort of a stopping point, like a town like Bolshoi-Salatskoye, or some major roadwork or geographical feature, like the Reka Sem over here near Glishkovo. This is showing
And
us
the
that
Russians are extremely worried. Like they've been panicking all day long, and also they were panicking as late as 5 days ago about this hypothetical invasion that was going to take place sometime before January the 7th. The Russians had been saying that in their Telegram channels, and they had been freaking out because they weren't really prepared for this. It came too late. They learned of the intel way too late, and they weren't able to actually get prepared. The Russians claim that about 20,000 plus Ukrainian troops are going to be involved in this offensive, and we don't know if that's true or not. But if it is true, the Russians are saying in their own channels that they are not ready to deal with that. And once again, the North Koreans, even though they are in the area, they're not equipped to handle this either. They're getting wiped out by the battalion in literally 48 hours, which is insane in itself. So the Russians are just freaking out. They don't know what to do once again. And it's like a repeat, basically a repeat of the original invasion of Kursk with the panic levels that are going on.
And it looks as though things are going quite badly. Based off of the evacuation order that has been given by the Russian, I guess you could say, oblast authorities within Kursk, it looks as though they're expecting to lose the entirety of the R200 highway here within the next few days. Now, of course, that might not happen. They may be able to stabilize defensive positions somewhere along the R200 and stop the Ukrainian advance, but at this moment, it doesn't really appear that that's going to be the case. Once again, we're not getting a lot of footage on the ground of the actual advance due to operational security reasons, but we're also getting enough telltale signs from the Russian Federation's government within the Kursk Oblast that things are going very poorly, considering that they're evacuating everything from Bolshoi-Salatskoye up to the E38 highway. They have to naturally be expecting that they're going to be losing this entire area. They do not willy-nilly or haphazardly order mandatory evacuations in the Russian Federation. In fact, it's usually the opposite. They usually just don't order evacuations. If they do, they were usually voluntary. Rarely ever were they mandatory, and they were only mandatory when it looked like they were about to lose a large amount of ground. And what is another thing that the United States was able to tell us today that also is leading us to believe that things are going very badly right now within the area is that apparently the North Koreans, according to U.S. intelligence that is, and according to United 24, has lost an entire battalion in 48 hours. That is before the offensive even began. And to give you all an idea of how big a North Korean battalion is, that's about 1,000 guys wounded and killed in 48 hours that the North Koreans have suffered alone. That is a significant number. And, you know, if we actually wanted to figure out how big a North Korean battalion is, we could just go reference the ATP and get an exact number on that. But I'm not going to bore y'all with that and looking through a whole bunch of numbers and really a whole bunch of technical information. So I'll skip going to the ATP and I'll just tell y'all roughly a battalion is about 1,000. In North Korea, however, their numbers are just whack. Like, it's like their units are insanely large. Like, they'll say, oh, this is like, let me think, a brigade, and it has like 10,000 people on it. And it's like, that's not a brigade. That's like almost a corps. It's like, y'all are like freaking insane. Like, no, that's more like a division, really. But they're freaking insane with the amount of numbers of troops that they'll put into a single unit. So a battalion in a North Korean scale could be somewhere close to being nearly half a brigade in Western scales, or really even Russian scales. But we're most likely assuming that when this information was put out, the Ukrainians and the United States were really working off of the idea that this is a Western-sized battalion worth of losses, which means that there's around 800 to 1,000 North Koreans that have been wounded and killed in just 48 hours. Once again, we want to point out this was before the offensive even began today. This was preceding the offensive by an entire day. the North Koreans are losing droves of their own troops, and that generally is because they are poorly trained and inadequately equipped for the modern battlefield. It's a pretty tough situation for the North Koreans and the Korean People's Army. We just generally see that they are entirely combat ineffectual. It in fact seems to me to be a hindrance for the Russian Federation to even have these troops on the front line, because they are filling up areas of the front line with completely ineffective troops. If the Ukrainians push on them, they collapse. If they push on the Ukrainians, they collapse. They have practically no cohesion, no communication, no training, no supplies, nothing. Like, they have nothing. We knew that when they were going in, and now we're clearly seeing it. That was straight up 100% accurate analysis, and I don't even know why in the world the Russians are even keeping them on the front lines. I would say that if I was a Russian commander, I would be heavily advocating at this point to the Ministry of Defense to use these forces as either manual labor or logistical support, because they have no damn clue what they're doing on a fighting front line, and it would be better to fill up the front line with actual Russian soldiers, as poorly trained as they are, because they're about 10 times better than the KPA is at this point. But the Russians are stupid enough.
That's what I was about to say. That's what I was about to say. We haven't even heard of Russian losses being this bad, like with how fast they're losing troops. Even though there is a little bit of a variation in the battalion sizes here, that's still a ton of troops to lose, even with their definition of a battalion. And we don't even see that happening on the Russian side. So, you know, it is true. Like, I think we're proving the point here that the North Korean troops are simply human fodder that the Russians are using. And it appears to be that maybe the Russians believe that is the best way to use the North Koreans. And like you said, they could use them behind the lines, like for manual labor or something else. There are support roles that the North Koreans could fill instead. And, you know, with Kim and everybody else, including Putin, knowing these troops are not trained well enough to actually fight on the front line, they are knowingly and willfully putting these guys out there as human shields, and it's just in the wide open.
But they're not even really human shields, because they were a critical part of the defense today conducted by the Russians, and it looks as though they collapsed. Like, just in the number of losses that they've taken, we would have to assume that those losses are so critical that their unit has completely collapsed and maybe even disintegrated and has gone into a rout. So they're not even really an effective shield defensively, and they're not effective offensively, so why even have them there? Like, that would be like putting myself in the shoes of a Russian field commander. I would be saying at this point, this is such an ineffective fighting force. It doesn't even matter if it's mitigating our casualties. They are a liability to put anywhere on an active front. If the Ukrainians know where they are and they conduct an offensive into them, they're probably just going to collapse, because they don't even have the cohesion or the communication abilities to properly coordinate with each other. One platoon gets engaged by the Ukrainians. They don't know what's going on around the periphery, so they start taking significant losses from FPV drones, mortar fire, and then the advancing Ukrainians, they freak out and they just pack up and run. And then the other platoons nearby see them picking up and running, and once again, because they don't have a proper communication chain, they don't know what's going on, so they see one group running, so now they're thinking it's a rout. So then these guys get up and they go running as well. That's just like the offensives. I think that's what happened in the defensive today as well, is that so many of them are just running, or they're taking in such insane losses, it doesn't even matter if they're running or not. Their units have been decimated or destroyed to the point they're not even offering effective resistance to the Ukrainians. So I would say,
but what's even more wild though is this: the Russians are not backing off using these guys. Like Kim is talking about sending more of them. He's still talking about sending more, and Putin and also his generals have not rejected that or made any public statement saying that they're not going to keep accepting more North Korean soldiers into the fight. So it sounds like they intend to keep this going. So I'm still going to stick with my analysis on this one. I think they're using them as a human shield, and even though it's not a very effective human shield, and once again, that's very sick. I want to make that clear. I'm not advocating that or condoning it whatsoever. That is a sick method of war, and Russia is proving how sick they are by doing something like this. But it looks like they're intending on bringing in even more larger numbers of North Koreans to make this even a larger human shield. So it's just really sick, and Kim is just placating it all the way.
I would say that's actually true. But while that's how things are going to happen on the diplomatic level, I just think, sorry everyone, I just think that it's not really the fact that they're doing well, and it's not really the fact that the Russians think that they're working well as human shields or anything. I think it's just simply the fact that the Russians just want bodies. Not even for a human shield, they just want bodies to have them, so that way they can consider North Korea as a strategic partner, and then the North Koreans in exchange get materials, and who knows what that is. It's most likely food and consumer goods, but it may also be military equipment and training as well. But I would really have to be honest, the Russians have provided no training at all to this expeditionary force, so any training that they provide to the KPA at large, I would assume is very questionable, if not even existent. That's what I would generally believe. But still, this thing is going bad. That's all we can really say about it right now. Based off of the losses, based off the Russian civil administration's actions with the mandatory evacuation, and the video footage that we have of the advance going on right now, things are not going well. And we do know, as I stifle cough after cough, that a lot of people are talking about what Ukraine's strategy may be right now in this offensive. And some people are saying that the Ukrainians are trying to get some diplomatic leverage against the Russian Federation, moving on towards possible negotiations in the future, which I would have to say is very unlikely, at least given the current atmosphere. If anyone saw the statements made by Putin over the past few weeks and the Lex Fridman interview with Zelensky today, it does not seem as though either side is looking towards negotiations at the moment, because there's not enough amicable terms, or neither side is really close enough, at least in their own capacity, to collapse for negotiations to effectively happen. But still, a lot of people are saying that this may be happening to try and get some sort of leverage whenever those peace talks start to begin. Others are saying that the Ukraine is redirecting Russian Federation forces from the front lines inside of Ukraine and towards the areas inside of Russia, like Kursk. Some others are also saying that Ukraine is buying more time for more aid, possibly just trying to prolong the war so that way they can get more military support, so that way their doctrine can continue to shift towards a superior firepower doctrine, which is a very Western-based sort of a mindset. And then others are unsure and undecided at this point on what they're really thinking about, what the actual offensive goals of this offensive are in the big picture. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So once again, the question is, what is Ukraine's strategy with this brand new full-scale offensive into Kursk? Yet for the second time, we'll call this Kursk 2.0. So 49% of the audience said Ukraine is trying to get leverage for negotiations, while 28% said Ukraine is redirecting Russian troops from the front line in Ukraine over to Kursk to gain an advantage, and 15% said Ukraine is buying time for more aid. So the most popular option here is Ukraine is trying to get leverage. And honestly, I did listen to the Lex Fridman interview today. I heard Zelensky's side of things, and obviously we already know where the madman Putin stands on the side of things that he has. It sounds to me, I agree with the Enforcer, neither side is really ready to negotiate just yet, and I understand exactly where Zelensky is coming from. He is basically saying that without some type of NATO membership or something forcing the West to actually come to Ukraine's aid if Russia does reinvade in the event of a peace talk, then there is no real peace talks to be had. I do agree with him on that perspective. So I would say that I think the negotiations probably won't happen, but the idea here is, and the upcoming U.S. administration is encouraging Zelensky to go ahead and try to get as much leverage as possible in the hope that maybe peace talks can still happen in some form or another. I don't think they're going to happen, but I think that's currently the mindset behind this sudden Kursk offensive that is happening right before the inauguration of the next U.S. president. So once again, this is going to be a very fast offensive and a very hardline one as well that moves very quickly. But I'm with the 48%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm with the 48% as well. I think this is certainly being done to try and get some sort of leverage in future peace talks. At this point in the war, a lot of things, really everything is being done with the idea of trying to gain some sort of leverage in negotiations of the future. Whenever those will happen, everything is trying to get a leverage in those negotiations. Total victory will not be possible on either side. The Ukrainians will not be able to impose a total victory on the Russian Federation, but the Russian Federation sure as hell is not going to be able to attain a total victory in Ukraine. 3 years of fighting has shown that they will never be able to achieve a major strategic victory on the battlefield to be able to achieve all of their aims in Ukraine. So with this in mind, the Ukrainians right now are trying to get themselves into a position that whenever those talks begin, they will be in a good spot to get more terms their way than the Russians will be able to get on their end. However, I will say this, because Matthew and me listened to the interview today that Zelensky had with Lex Fridman, and I'll have to be entirely honest with y'all, neither side at this point is looking for peace. at least at this point in the conflict. The Russian Federation has made it very clear publicly that they are looking to achieve all of their war goals inside of Ukraine. And their war goals are very extensive, very lengthy, and there's been absolutely no compromise on the Russian negotiating end from the beginning of the war to now to try and see that maybe if they give some things to Ukraine and the Western world, the conflict will end. At this point, even with the Russian economy going into freefall, the Russian Federation's government is still insisting on an absolute victory in Ukraine, which is absolutely unacceptable to Western negotiators and Ukrainian negotiators. However, the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian government as well, as we were hearing from Zelensky today, is also viewing that they are absolutely not accepting the current conditions of the war, and they want to further the conflict on for a while longer, who knows how long, to be able to see that they will be able to shift the war more in their favor, so that way they will be able to achieve the war goals and objectives that they are looking for. And while the Ukrainians appear, at least according to Zelensky in prior statements over the past few months, to not be looking for total victory, they are still seeing that at this moment, that a lot of the things that they see to as being critical or cruxes of the peace talks to achieve an end to the conflict will not be met at this point with the current situation on the battlefield. And so for this reason, Zelensky is also making it very clear that the war will most likely go on. Now, this moves us all out to a much grander picture, which is the United States and our position in this. So the United States, as powerful as we are, and as proud of a republic as we have been historically, can only go so far in negotiating a peace in between two parties that do not want peace. The Russians have made it very clear that they are not going to accept any peace conditions that are not total victory. And that is going to be unacceptable to the United States of America just on our outset. We're not talking about Ukraine on this. I'm going to talk from a completely American perspective here. That is entirely unacceptable from our perspective. The Ukrainians are also not adamant on wanting to get a peace at this point at any cost as well. And so this means that the United States' hands are bound. We can largely force the Ukrainians, with the amount of military leverage that we have over them with arms support, to go into a peace negotiations, but the Russians' terms will still be entirely unacceptable. Not just to Ukraine, but also to the United States as well. And that means that these peace talks that may be coming around, I'm gonna let y'all know, if peace talks do come around during the spring of this year or the summer of this year, do not think that the war is going to end. The war is not going to end. It, in fact, is most likely going to ramp up after the fact because the Russians are going to offend Ukraine and the United States so significantly in these peace talks with the terms that they'll lay out and the negotiating position that they'll officially take that the United States is probably going to end up ramping up military support to Ukraine way more than we've seen in the past. Most likely to try and start forcing the Russian Federation into an unacceptable position, at least in their minds, because the Ukrainians will finally be able to emphasize a doctrine of superior firepower, which is something that they've always been working towards through this conflict, but they've never really been able to achieve. Because while the Ukrainian army is smaller than the Russian Federation's in terms of actual combat power, they have been able to leverage a pretty significant amount of firepower throughout the course of the war for their size. And this is what's led them to have major successes defensively since 2023 and onwards, after the end of all of the major movements, kind of in the Battle of the Frontier phase that we saw at the beginning of the war, where the Ukrainians were able to claim major offensive successes in Kharkiv and Kherson. Since then, the Ukrainians have been able to hold extremely successful defensives, bleeding the Russian Federation dry militarily during most major battles, and also mitigating their losses heavily, once again using a great deal of firepower to do so in return. However, the amount of superior firepower that the Ukrainians are able to leverage at this point is not that much, and technically the Russians are still outfiring them every single day in just about every single metric in terms of munitions. So if the peace negotiations fell, the only way that the Ukrainians will be able to see themselves get to a point in the negotiating table where the United States and Ukraine are happy with the terms that the Russians are willing to accept will be by the United States throwing pretty much everything, including the kitchen sink, at the Ukrainians in terms of firepower support, so that way the Ukrainians can actually match the Russians shot for shot on the field, because if they're able to do that, we most likely will start to see that the Russian Federation's losses or attritional rate will start to become so high, and of course due to the lack of Russian economic abilities, these losses will be completely untenable. untenable. So then at that point, we probably will see that the negotiating table is returned to again, and the Russians will actually be willing to concede on some of their terms, and Ukraine will largely be able to achieve the majority of the important terms that they are looking for in that kind of a peace negotiation. That's most likely what we're going to be seeing, and I think that's why the Ukrainians are doing what they're doing right now, is that they're trying to already precede the failed peace talks that may be coming around with some offensive action to show that the Ukrainians have the grit and the ability to be able to conduct a successful offensive even at this phase in the conflict before they even achieve any further large amounts of Western support that will see the firepower disparity greatly decreased in between the Russians and the Ukrainians. That's what I think is going on right now. So with that,
I will say though, after listening to the interview today that Lex Fridman had with Zelensky. By the way, I want to say this because I saw Lex Fridman getting a lot of hate. He was asking some tough questions, and I personally think that he is a little bit naively optimistic about the hope for peace between the two countries. I don't think he truly understands how depraved Putin really is. But that's not to say Lex did a bad job with the interview. I think it was good, and once again, he was able to get the interview, which is something we've not been able to accomplish. So got to give him credit for that. And also, of course, it was good to hear a 3-hour conversation with Zelensky's point of view. And after hearing it from Zelensky in his own words, I do completely understand where Zelensky is coming from about all of his positions, because basically what he's saying is even if they have negotiations and there is no peace guarantees for Ukraine, for example, like actual guarantees, not memorandums and not just loose agreements, real concrete guarantees, like for example, NATO membership or even partial NATO membership, then Russia will simply use the time between ending the war currently and the next time they launch it to simply rebuild their forces and go at it again. And after hearing that, I do agree with it 100%. I think Zelensky is basically telling the United States, I'm willing to entertain the peace talks, but the peace talks are not actually going to be a real peace. It's going to be simply, basically going through the motions of trying to get peace, but it's not what's actually needed. So basically what Zelensky's looking for is he's looking for a lot more support to bring Russia to its knees, either economically or on the battlefield, in the hopes that maybe something will happen to the Putin regime where he gets put out of power or the entire government collapses and it basically takes care of itself. That's the real peace that Zelensky is looking for. And honestly, I think that is the only real situation in which Ukraine would actually get a peace instead of actually coming to an agreement with the madman Putin. I don't think an agreement with Putin is ever going to be upheld in any meaningful way. And it would simply mean that Ukraine gets reattacked in the future. So, Enforcer, what do you think? Do you agree with Zelensky or do you disagree?
I would largely have to agree with Zelensky because something that a lot of people do not understand about war when talking about it, and I'm going to say this, and whenever I say the word ignorance, it's not meant offensively, it's just meant to say what it is. I'll admit ignorance on things from time to time as well, but a lot of people in the public are in a state of ignorance about how conflicts work and how they can even end or start. Conflicts begin because there is a complete lack of diplomatic or really foreign policy foresight to see that diplomatic relations are beginning to deteriorate over a major topic. When Ukraine requested to join NATO in 2021, if the United States had and this is something I'm going to just say up front, if the administration that was in charge in the United States at the time had enough foreign policy foresight to see where that was going, we would have already started to openly back the Ukrainian side, because if we had done that, we would have forced the confrontation in between Russia and the West to be right there before the war even began in Ukraine. And that would have moved everything to the diplomatic negotiating table immediately, and then we would have been able to see some sort of an amicable solution created without this war dragging on for 3 years. However, that was not the case. The conflict began because of the breakdown of really diplomatic ambition that the United States had in 2021. Most likely that may have been a consequence of the collapse of Afghanistan in late 2020, which may have actually had an effect on the decision making at the time, that maybe we just need to have a more hands-off approach, because politically in the United States, foreign policy actions weren't really seen to be that good, because one of our major foreign policy actions of the last 20 years had completely collapsed in a matter of about a month and a half while we were withdrawing. But beyond that, the war then began. And so from that point forward, the war should really be viewed, this is how it actually is, as a beast that has been unleashed onto the world, and while world governments have a great deal of control, we don't really have a lot of control over this particular beast. The Russians don't, the Ukrainians don't, and we don't. No one really has a lot of control over it. The war just goes on. It is a existent force of being out there in the world right now. And while both sides can just say, let's end it, and you could just write away all of your freedoms or just go to an unconditional surrender, wars do not happen that way and never have. No one just goes into a conflict and goes, you know what, I don't really feel like it, let's just go for an unconditional peace where the other side can just ask for whatever they want. Because then could screw over a country well on into their future for centuries if that is agreed on. So with that in mind, considering that the Russians aggressed on the Ukrainians and the Ukrainians are in a defensive conflict, the Ukrainians are looking at it from a position of the Russian terms are unacceptable because it ends the sovereignty of the state of Ukraine and it immediately becomes a Russian puppet state. The entire existent state of things in Ukraine ends if those terms are met. That is something that the Ukrainians will never accept. The Russians, on the other hand, will not accept Ukraine joining NATO, at least for now, and I want to make that a little clear, because there's going to be ways things are changed here. The Russians will not accept Ukraine joining NATO. The Russians will not accept Ukraine having their original 1991 borders. The Russian Federation will not accept the current Ukrainian government as it exists, the Civic Institute existing as it does right now. Those are the reasons why the Russian Federation invaded Ukraine. And so right now, 3 years later, we are seeing that the state of Ukraine gets a great deal of economic and military support from the Western world. And while the Ukrainian state may be a small one, and quite honestly, economically and militarily insignificant, it is attached to the Western world, which, as an apparatus, is the economically most important and militarily largest force on the planet. So with their attachment to the Western world, their position is fairly secure. It doesn't really matter what the real internal situation is in Ukraine, because it is able to be pretty much artificially supported from outside and maintain a state of stability. The Russian Federation, on the other hand, does not have that kind of a buffer or a barrier to their realistic situation because of war fatigue. The Russians have no financial or military backers of any significant scale, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea doesn't really count as one. While they're able to send over manpower and they're able to send over simple munitions, the North Koreans just do not count as a major financial backer. Their GDP is smaller than most American billionaires, so they don't have enough money at all to give to the Russians, much less for themselves. So with this in mind, the Russians are actually dealing with war fatigue in real time, and they're not being artificially supported by some sort of an external force. So with this in mind, factoring this in, this is why the Russian economy is going into free fall at the moment, why rapid inflation is setting in, and we're also starting to see a great stagnation of Russian economic abilities. So while that is going on right now, it has not reached a critical point of inflection where the Russian economy is about to collapse. They're getting there as each month passes, but it's not there just yet. So right now, with the position that Putin is in, he knows that there is still time to continue on the war and hope that eventually, for some reason inside the Western world, diplomatic support, foreign support for Ukraine dwindles. That's the only way that the situation will change on the Ukrainian side, because beyond that, Ukraine is heavily planted into the position they're in now, which is a very good one for them and a very good one for the Western world. Now, the Russians also probably know this. Putin knows that there most likely will be an attempt made, just for the political aspirations of the incoming president-elect, for peace talks in Ukraine. That is most likely something that will be attempted, although I will be honest with y'all, any reasonable advisor to the president will tell him that the chances of a peace negotiation coming up with an amicable or successful outcome is highly unlikely. And this is going to be understood going into the peace negotiations if they even happen during the spring or the summer. They may be shot down before they even happen, but regardless whether they're shot down before the peace negotiations happen or if the peace negotiations fall apart in the middle of the talks, the end result is going to be the same. The United States of America is going to be offended by the Russian statements and actions, and now the refusal to end the war is not going to be viewed by the public or the U.S. government as a failure of Ukraine's diplomatic initiative. It is actually going to be a belligerent action by the Russian Federation's diplomatic initiative. This gives political and diplomatic justification inside the United States to massively support the Ukrainians, more so than has been throughout the remainder of the conflict, to be able to force the Russians into accepting terms that are within the West's favor through superior firepower. So this is a
And
large...
also, Russia's foreign minister Lavrov has already shot down the idea of the current peace proposal coming out of the United States from the next administration. He's already shot that down and said Russia will not entertain that under any circumstance. And that basically blew that out of the water. So I think that's all of a sudden why you've seen this shift with Ukraine and the foreign policy coming out of the United States is because of that recent statement from Lavrov. I think in the background, pretty much everybody has come to the conclusion this is not going anywhere. And if we have any hope of winning the war on Ukraine's behalf, we have to keep funding and also arming them to the teeth. And I think Putin actually proved that point to the United States himself, instead of Zelensky having to be the one convincing us of that. Putin basically did it himself.
I would think so. That's most likely, realistically, how things are going to be going here in the near future. And I see people in the chat, as it always has been, rebutting and saying, no, you're wrong, and you're naive, and you don't know what you're talking about. And that's fine. I've been told that for 3 years. And you know what the crazy thing is? We've been right on about 80% of stuff, and most people who say that have been wrong about 100% of the time. So I'm fine with that. Like, people can believe that or not. That is most likely how it's going to go. Because the only other way, which this would be completely unreasonable, and this is why I'm assuming that some people may be living outside of reality right now making those claims, some people will sit there and say, oh, no, because in the domestic political world in the United States, I have to hate whoever's in charge to the point that they can never do anything reasonable. The incoming president-elect isn't in my political camp. Much like many people who didn't like the current sitting president, who's still here right now, acted like everything he did was horrendous and terrible and there was no redeeming quality of the guy. That's how the incoming president-elect is going to be treated by some people. So they're going to say, oh no, he's just going to go in and do something absolutely stupid and just give Ukraine up wholesale, which we already know isn't going to happen, because we already have heard from the current president that him and the president-elect have been working together to see that a peace through strength model is emphasized, which, to be entirely honest with y'all, there is already a historical precedent for, not to speak on modern politics here, but to give you all the most recent example from the Cold War of such a concept by President Nixon in Vietnam through the peace through strength model that was conducted there. In the attempt to bring peace to Vietnam and withdraw U.S. forces, we ended up bombing the North Vietnamese more than we had throughout the rest of the conflict in the final years of the war, and we also ended up bombing Laos and Cambodia significantly as well. That was all in an attempt. It was actually the bloodiest point in the conflict, and it was the bloodiest point in the conflict because we were looking to force an end to the war by creating amicable, well, really forcing the North Vietnamese to accept American terms or otherwise face complete annihilation by U.S. Air Forces. That was what our real solution was to that conflict. And going off of that, if the Russians are not willing to meet our demands, we will bomb them further through the Ukrainians by providing them with support until the terms become acceptable. So their option is to be reasonable now or to suffer later. And the Russians appear to be clearly choosing at this point that they want to suffer later. So with that in mind, that's most likely how the peace negotiations are going to go. Because we're not going to go into the peace negotiations and go, okay, we're looking to assure ourselves of our terms. Russia, what are you willing to do? Screw you, total victory. Okay, that's fine. And then give that to them. That's never going to happen, because no one in the United States would stand for a thing like that. It would be viewed as an absolute diplomatic failure. But beyond that, we do have a lot of people saying that Zelensky says that Russia has lost an entire North Korean Expeditionary Battalion within 48 hours. And some people are wondering, why in the world are the losses on the North Koreans so severe? And a lot of people believe that they're being used as human shields. Others believe that they're just simply untrained and inadequate, which is probably that is most likely, highly likely, very true. And then others are saying that it seems like a Russian strategic failure, and some others are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so why are the North Korean losses so severe on the Russian front lines? And it looks like 55% of the audience said it's because North Koreans are being used by Russia as human shields, and 30% said North Koreans are simply untrained and that's simply why it happened, and 10% said it seems like a Russian strategic failure. And I would definitely say I'm with the 55%. The North Koreans are being used by Russia as the human shields, and even if you had a trained or untrained soldier, if you put them out front like that with very minimal resources, they are going to be taken out pretty quick. Granted, they probably would last a little bit longer with some more training, but they still are going to get taken out because that is simply the way the Russians are fighting right now. They're fighting a war of attrition, and it looks like the North Koreans are getting attrited the fastest because they're getting put out there first, and then the Russians follow up behind to get attrited a little bit longer down the road, a little bit further down the road, but eventually they get it also. So I'm with the 56%, but Enforcer, what say you? Enforcer, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
You know, I muted Matthew because I was coughing and I forgot to unmute. So
You see, I was staying silent the whole time because I thought maybe it was something happening on my end and I was going to quietly deal with it. But then I figured, wait a minute, I can't, the audience isn't hearing you either, man. I was hearing you back there talking a whole monologue. I was like, am I going crazy or something? But anyways, go right ahead.
Sorry about it, everyone. I've actually been coughing a good bit during the show. It's just that I mute the mic to go cough, and I have to physically press the mute button, and I cannot see it, so I have to like crane my head around the microphone to do that. I thought I unmuted it, and I hadn't, so sorry about that, everyone. But to really quickly explain what's going on with the North Koreans, to start this all over again, since no one heard the beginning of it, I believe it's a combination of the two most popular answers. The North Koreans are being used as human shields, and they also have a complete lack of training. Now, we know that they do not have any significant training for the modern fighting environment because the U.S. Army has made a publication on North Korean tactics as we understand their tactics to look like from defectors. And these defectors have been very broad and wide in their experience in the KPA, so we have been able to amalgamate a pretty decent understanding of what North Korean fighting tactics actually look like on both a tactical level and a strategic level as far as we know. So with this in mind, this is ATP 7-100.2, written by the Department of the Army on North Korean tactics. This was published in July of 2020, but to be entirely honest with y'all, while this is about 5 years old at this point, this is still probably very modern, at least in terms of its actual impact on understanding of North Korean tactics, because the North Koreans don't really evolve that much militarily, and currently their actions on the front are showing that that's certainly true. So we do understand that this is most likely a very contemporary model or understanding of what North Korean tactics look like. And with this in mind, nothing about them looks good. I mean, everything about the KPA is incredibly antiquated and ancient. I mean, even the amount of equipment that they are provided is insanely small. Like, I'll actually go show y'all this really quickly and just give y'all a list of the equipment that a single North Korean unit will be provided. And I was also watching, because I'm trying to learn more about the North Koreans, some other stuff that I'll throw in here in a second on what actual defectors said the amount of training that they got is. So let me go see. Let's see here. We need to scroll through all of this business down to where they start talking about the different sized elements and the amount of equipment in them. So let's see here. We're eventually getting there. Here we go. This is a KPA infantry division, a very significant sized unit, mind you. It has 13,000 personnel inside of it. So this thing is huge, at least in terms of what the Western world would consider a division. This thing is about 1.5 to 2 times larger than a Western-sized division in terms of manpower. So this thing is huge. Like, this thing would be a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield, just in terms of its size. But that also has a whole deal, like, it gets very nuanced when we start talking about command and control on the battlefield. These kinds of larger-sized units like this, at this kind of a divisional level, are actually very unwieldy and very difficult to operate. So for this reason, it actually ends up being a huge hindrance. difference. And that's another thing that shows why their strategy is antiquated, because these sized units would be seen at the very early onset of the Cold War in the 50s or during World War II in the 1940s in some sort of a Soviet World War II model. These things are insanely big. Like, this is from the days when you got in lines and you shot at each other across a field. Like, these units just... You don't see divisions this big anymore. But what's even crazier is the amount of equipment that they have for 13,000 men. They only have 31 T-55 tanks to spread out across this entire division. So the tanks are mythical. Like, almost anyone in this division on the battlefield would probably never even see a tank because there's only 31 of them. They only have 54 recoilless rifles. They only have 27 anti-tank guided missile launchers, 27 of them, mind you, for an entire division. Like, that is insane. Like they have no anti-tank abilities. They have no armor support abilities. They don't have any armored, like mechanized abilities at all. They don't have any APCs in an average KPA infantry division. So they're dismounted foot infantry walking from place to place. And that also means that they have no mechanized or motorized abilities to support themselves logistically. So all of their logistical support has to be done on foot as well, which means that the amount of logistical capacity that they have is wildly low because there's only so much supplies that a person can carry. Usually, they're only able enough to carry enough supplies for themselves. So this means that this division is going to be bound down to a specific spot very, very close to a railhead, if they even have any kind of railroad logistics to work off of in this instance. They only have 48 anti-tank guns of the 76.2 millimeter variety, which, by the way, just to put this out there, that is such a small caliber and has such a low amount of armor penetration abilities, if we're speaking about that in the form of a 76.2 millimeter main gun found in the BMP-1. That is so inadequate. This is more so of an infantry support gun than it is an anti-tank gun in the modern day. That thing would do nothing. And on top of that, considering that there is no motorized ability to transport the AT gun, its ability to fire and maneuver is wildly small. I mean, by the time this thing fires and it starts scooting, and they've scooted for about 3 minutes, they're still within eyeshot of the people that they shot at. So there's really no shoot and scoot with these AT guns. They're stuck in place. As Rita Fuchs throws in a $400. Oh my, we just hit the goal!
The goal!
Oh,
let's go, Jaga Jaga, Igor, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. Let's go.
Absolutely crazy. I gotta say, absolutely phenomenal. A big shout out to everyone for hitting the goal tonight. Absolutely crazy. And Nicholas Condor just threw in a 250.
Damn.
Dang.
Look at that. Man, the Fundraiser is going crazy here at the last minute. What happened, folks? It's going crazy. I mean, come on, Jack. Whoa.
Man, it's going crazy. But beyond that, thank you, everyone, for the massive support of the Fundraiser. Y'all are helping out Ukraine a significant amount tonight. But also, I want to just show y'all a few more things about this division, because it just blows me away. They have 630 RPG-7s, which is kind of okay, but it's not a lot. Like, that's the only thing that they're adequately supplied in at all. But you have to remember that RPGs have a very short range. RPGs are usually effective less than 200 yards away from a tank. So we have to assume that for their anti-tank abilities to finally shine through and for them to be, like, just decently adequate, and armor had to have advanced literally on top of them at that point for them to fire onto the tanks. And even then, the amount of damage that an RPG-7 is going to inflict in the modern day isn't going to be much. Because would you believe it, folks? But the main thing that every main battle tank in the Western world has been designed to really defeat these days are RPG-7s. So at that point, the anti-tank ability is completely useless because literally every single Western vehicle has been designed to just shrug them off. So then the anti-tank ability, while they're finally adequately equipped in something, is completely inadequate for the modern battlefield. Now let's go on to the artillery. They have none for an entire division. They have about 100 artillery pieces, and that's nothing. They have maybe about 150 mortars that are of an effective caliber. And Hal Rose just threw in a 333, by the way. Holy moly! I mean, absolutely crazy. But beyond that, another thing that they have none of are 42 man-pads. I'm guessing that those are in the HQ section of the division, which is insane to just have 42 man-pads, and I guess they're at the divisional command level. That's nothing. So this unit has no air defense, and then they have some anti-aircraft guns, and beyond that, they have only 370 heavy machine guns. And then, to top it all off, the icing on the cake, they have 9,000 AKs. So to put this out there, I just want to remind everyone who's on a crew-served weapon doesn't get shit. Like, they're just walking around unarmed. So if you're on a mortar crew, you don't have a gun. Like, that has to be how this works out. If you have an RPG-7, you don't have a gun. So your only weapon is the RPG-7. You have no backup AK. You don't have an AKS-74U if you're a tanker. You just have nothing. So it's like the only people who have rifles are the infantry. And a defector also said, because I was watching an interesting video, Matthew, about a North Korean soldier who defected a few years ago and was interviewed in South Korea recently. He said that in his KPA infantry unit, when he was actually living outside of Pyongyang before he joined the Storm unit, each year, annually, each soldier was allocated 3 rifle rounds, 5.45 by 39 rifle rounds for marksmanship training purposes. Only 3 rounds.
That's crazy. That is so small, man. That's like at the Barney Fife levels of ammunition. But also, big shout out to Barry Woodward, by the way. Just threw in a $336 donation and brought us up to $3,400 even. And Barry, I appreciate that nice even round figure right there of a nice 400 like that. And also, we are smashing the goal. We're almost 1,000 above the goal already, which is crazy.
That is absolutely insane right there. Blowing us away, honestly. Big shout out to all of y'all. But still, I keep on showing all this. I just saw Defender Marcia say, I think this is at least the 4th time he's pulled out this document. I pull it out because it is it's like the Bible pretty much on the KPA. It's the only thing that we have where we can actually reference anything that the KPA would be capable of beyond their own propaganda. And it just shows such a woeful, inadequate story. And this is why they've got to be dying in mass. While Robert G throws in 100. Dang, people are going wild, man. We just hit 3.5.
We got a ton of top donors, man. This list is getting so long, man.
It is. It's getting insanely long. And that's actually about to bring us on to it here in a second. But anyways, the whole point of me showing this to y'all is to show y'all how inadequately equipped they are, much less trained. And then the defector tells us that they only fire 3 rounds a year. That's what they're located in an average infantry unit. And that's not any elite unit or anything like that. That's just an average infantry unit. So your average infantry unit gets no training with their small arms, probably no training with any of the other equipment, and they certainly aren't driving the tanks around on the training fields much because North Korea is just completely deficient on fuel reserves. So in large, they're not even trained, so that's the only thing they can be used for is a human shield. And then at that point, they're also ineffective as well because they have practically no morale. But anyways, I would say it's a combination of the two. Basic reason why I'm throwing all that out there, it's a combination of the two. Very little training and their human shields. And so with that, Matthew, who do we have as the top donors of this fundraiser tonight? Because it has been going off the rails for the past few minutes. So let us hear some of the names of the honored and valorous people of the LSA who have made this fundraiser possible tonight.
All right, so just to recap real quick, we're currently up to $3,500 raised, which is exactly $1,000 above the goal, which is crazy to see, and huge shout out to the LSA for doing that. And also, we had a massive $400 donation from Rita Fuchs, the largest one of the night, and huge shout out to Rita for throwing in that massive support. We also have a 336 from Barry Woodward, as well as a 333 from Hal Rose, and huge shout out to Barry and Hal for that massive support also. We had a 250 from Nicholas Condor, which is also massive, as well as a 100 from some guy called the Enforcer, along with Hal Rose once again. BC also threw in a 100, that's BC Skyman, along with Brian Justin, JMP Traveler, Eric Hutchins, Robert G, and then we had several $50 donations, the first being from Snow White, the second being from John King, then we had a 50 from Gator Nor, as well as Dad Good, Richard McGurl, Corsair F4U, as well as Bearcat, John Garner, and Purple Gerbil. And that is a ton of massive donations right there, and a huge shout to the LSA once again for helping us to smash that goal on January the 5th. The first fundraiser of 2025, that is, it was smashed, and we appreciate that all, the generosity from every single one of you. But once again, Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say a massive shout out and a huge thanks to everyone who has been a massive support to this fundraiser tonight, because it is really, really crazy to see that so many people have continued to support these fundraisers throughout the years, and not only that we continue to have a massive impact inside of Ukraine and helping out folks around the world in support of Western and American interests. It truly is an incredible thing, and I got to give a massive thanks to all of you once again, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we would not be able to make these fundraisers possible, and we wouldn't be able to continue to say that the Lee Spring Army will never truly die. Not as a channel, not as a fundraiser, as an entire entity, it will never truly die. And so with that, a massive thanks to all of y'all once again for supporting the fundraiser. And with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one. But, oh, buddy, we got to have a put down here, Matthew. We got to have a put down. I just... as I'm sick with this treachery that I've seen in the chat. Someone decided to challenge me here. So I was wanting to read this because I have to do a put down here. Sorry everyone, it's union rules. If someone says something stupid, I gotta put them down. Now they are blatantly incompetent. Check the manpower and TOE for a Western Light Infantry Division. I have no respect for North Korea, but lying about it to those that won't check anything is not okay. You have to be one of the most unintelligent people I've ever seen in this chat for a hot minute. Because you're sitting here and saying, because I'm reading off the table of equipment for a standard North Korean infantry division, that, oh my god, you're lying about them because they have about as much equipment as a light infantry division here in the West. Now, that is trying to sit here and deliberately make out some way to make me sound wrong. Because a infantry division, a standard infantry division, should be much better equipped than a light infantry division. A light infantry division is designed for mobility. So they are going to be as lightly equipped as possible and usually leaning a lot more on the motorized side. So you're saying that I'm wrong because the standard North Korean infantry division, which should be leaning more towards the firepower side of things, almost as a mechanized division, has about as much firepower as a Western motorized division. That makes no sense. That was such a bad way to try and get me. You are being exiled from the chat. Sorry to say it, but that one didn't make any sense at all. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can, because sometimes you always have to have a little bit of a viewer put down, because some people, I guess, get too big for their britches and then want to make points that make no sense, like obviously a Korean People's Army infantry division, which should be mechanized because that's the role it's filling. It obviously is only going to be equipped as much as a light division here in the West, and you're stupid to try and make a difference or a disparity out of that. Unfortunate and woeful activities indeed, and truly a blight upon this republic, that person's opinion. But anyways, with that, I understand, Matthew, that we have some very interesting questions. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we do have some very interesting questions to cover, but real quick, I do have a piece of breaking news here that we just learned a moment ago, and let me actually gather my pieces together here of articles to get this sort of coherence. So apparently there's been an incident somewhere around Japan from North Korea firing a ballistic missile. Let's see here. It looks like South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff reports that North Korea launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile, an IRBM, the same type of missile that Russia's firing on Ukraine the last time we saw it. It looks like from an area near Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, and it appears unclear if the launch involved a hypersonic glide vehicle or if an in-flight failure occurred, which could explain why the missile had such a short flight duration. So it looks like the missile crashed in... It looks like Japan's exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, somewhere outside of that. It looks like it fell somewhere around there, but it triggered some alerts inside of Japan and also some warnings to airmen from the ACAR system as well. So it looks like a bit of an incident here with another test coming out of North Korea. I'm trying to figure out what is so different about this one, but I'm still trying to gather the news. But Enforcer, do you have anything else that you've seen?
So based off of that information that you're giving, it sounds as though this happened at the same test range that the Hwasong intercontinental ballistic missile test occurred a little while ago, which was right near the Cheongdong testing range, which we can see right here. And this is the actual testing pad that the Hwasong 19 was fired from. So based off of that, it sounds as though this IRBM was also fired from the exact same testing range. But let me see what we have on Twitter here to see what we have. Let's see.
Also, by the way, I do want to make this note as well, that this comes around the same time here that apparently the U.S. Secretary of State Blinken is planning to visit South Korea. So it looks like it's sort of coinciding with that visit. So it could be maybe trying to send a message to the U.S. by launching this at this time, or it could simply be maybe a pre-planned launch that they had. But it appears to be unclear at the moment if there was a failure or not, or whether or not it was intended to go for such a short flight like that, with it crashing literally right off of Japan. Japan, which is not too far away from North Korea. It's not very clear right now at the moment. This happened literally like I think 20 or 30 minutes ago at the most. So it's pretty fresh. It just happened. But it looks like Japan had gotten very freaked out there for a minute that maybe something worse was going to happen. But it looks like for now, Japan was not actually affected, thankfully.
I've got to say, I've never looked at Japan's exclusive economic zone before. It's freaking massive. Like that's like practically like an entire 1/10 of the Pacific as their exclusive economic zone. That's actually insane because of all the little islands that they have as a part of their territory. But still, beyond that, that is very interesting to hear. And let's see here, from an area. Let's see. So it doesn't appear that we have a lot of information about the missile yet, but we can pretty much iron it down to being this testing range right here, because this is the closest one that we know of to Pyongyang. It's right outside of Pyongyang. It's actually connected to one of the few paved highways, which you can see right here. In the entirety of the country, which goes straight from Pyongyang, pretty much in a direct line to the actual testing range out here. I believe this is also accessible by train as well, if I remember correctly. But the test launch was probably done in this exact spot right here, like the last one, and then was fired across North Korea, and then landed somewhere in the Sea of Japan, near to the northern part of the main island, which I forgot the name of, dagnabbit. What is the, let's see, I gotta try and think of it here. It's Honshu. That's what it is. It probably towards the northern area of Honshu or right to the west of Hokkaido, one or the other, but it probably isn't that big of a deal. I would assume that the vehicle may not be hypersonic. We've never seen the North Koreans test a hypersonic ability yet, so if it was hypersonic, it'd be the first time ever that they've been able to successfully test one of those. Not that the technology is really cutting edge. The United States already had a working model for a hypersonic missile during the 1950s and the early 1960s. It's just that we never developed it because we considered it to be largely redundant, considering that ICBMs were already becoming a thing, and that pretty much made the hypersonic in a strategic sense completely moot. So with that in mind, I would say that it probably isn't an IRBM. If it is, it isn't really that impressive that it is an IRBM, but I most likely assume that it was some form of a conventional IRBM that had some sort of a failure. The North Koreans have had a decent amount of rocket failures in the past, so it wouldn't be too out there to say that this was another form of a test failure that occurred, and that's why it ended up landing within Japan's economic zone, is because it was probably meant to fly over Hokkaido and then into the Pacific, but instead it just, petered out and then landed somewhere within the Sea of Japan.
North Korea is one wrong step away, one failure away from actually impacting Japan, would be my assumption. It's good that they were able to prevent it from doing so. I think maybe it could have just had an unexpected explosion or something like that, causing it to go right into the sea, or maybe they actually forced it to go into the sea by remote control. I don't know. But one of these days, North Korea is going to play around with one of these missile tests. It's going to end up probably hitting, or some debris is going to hit Japan, and it's going to cause a hell of a situation. And they're going to probably eventually mess around enough and do something like that.
You know what's wild about these tests? They never consider the possible damage that may be caused in the splashdown area to maritime traffic within the area. That's never a consideration.
Yeah, they don't care one bit. There could be literally boats under there or anything. Under that scenario, though, I think that Japan would not view that as seriously as, for example, the missile impacting on the mainland. They would simply chalk that up to, maybe a slap on the wrist for North Korea or something like that, unless it was like a massive ship or something, or maybe a military vessel that was hit. But I think they'd pretty much let that one go compared to it, a missile hitting the mainland.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Who knows? They may want to see that as a justification for a military standoff. I would assume, regardless of the vessel, because if the North Koreans actually hit and damaged a Japanese vessel, and the Japanese had practically no response at all, that would probably entice the North Koreans to start acting even more aggressively, because they're seeing that they have to reach a greater aggressiveness threshold to be able to achieve any kind of real diplomatic impact. Because the North Koreans usually do these things, just to let y'all know, they usually lash out like this and conduct these wild tests to try and get some form of an appeasement from the Western world in food aid. That's usually what they've done it for in the past, and we have seen that over time, it doesn't really matter which approach we take to the North Koreans, whether it is a really hostile or aggressive one, or whether it's one where we appease them and we provide them food aid in exchange for them not conducting further tests. They still conduct further tests either way, because eventually the food aid isn't an adequate enough supply, according to them. And so then, because of the wicked imperialists of the United States, they start to provoke the entire world again into some sort of an armed conflict. Or if we face them down, they continue to just simply do it because they're still trying to find that food aid eventually. Basically, they're just blackmailing the Western world into giving into their demands unconditionally, or else they threaten nuclear hellfire. That's pretty much what they do these days. So this may be an extension of that. And considering that Blinken is arriving in the area, that is probably exactly the line that they're working down again, is that they're trying to achieve some sort of appeasement or food aid from the Western world by really starting to leverage their missile arsenal in this way. That's what I would assume. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you, Matthew, for sharing that breaking news with us. Hopefully we'll be able to keep some information on that coming throughout the course of the stream. But with that, it is time for us to gather a couple of questions from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first question of the night is going to go to AF Kaplan, who said, do you think the push being made by the AFU in Kursk will lead to their taking the Kursk nuclear power plant within that territory?
I'm somewhat doubtful. Generally, their advances moving down the R200 highway, and the Kursk nuclear power plant is actually near Ivanino, around here. It's actually right here on this exact spot. So with that in mind, I'm generally doubting that that is one of their offensive goals at the moment. I'm probably leaning more towards their attempting to seize the R200 and possibly sever the Russian highway connection down the E38 to threaten Russian flanks near Relisk and Koronivo from being cut off from major supply networks. That most likely is the most likely route of action that the Ukrainians are taking, because the seizure of the nuclear power plant doesn't really play a large amount in the strategic sense at the moment, because that power plant is practically already offline. Before they even invaded, it was pretty much offline. All of the reactors that are actually running right here, they have 4 of them at this power plant, are currently shut off at this time. The last one was shut off just months before the invasion began last year, because they're currently moving all functions over to Kursk 2, which is a brand new power plant that's being constructed with only 2 nuclear reactors, but these nuclear reactors are powerful enough that they actually will be able to provide the same amount of power to the grid that the 4 reactors on the southern side of the facility were providing in the past. So with this in mind, there actually are no functional reactors at this facility at the moment, and claiming it would not really pose that much of a strategic victory or really any kind of leverage over the Russian Federation. So I would generally doubt that they would want to do that. They probably would just be going for a actual shift on the strategic sense on the actual battlefield and start to threaten a large swath of territory within the Kursk Oblast of being pushed out or really taken over by the Ukrainians. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next question here is going to go to Real News Network, who said Russia is getting beat badly, and do you think they're going to move to using tactical nukes with this getting more severe?
I would say that it is not out of the realm of possibility. Tactical nuclear usage, at least on Russia's sovereign soil, is something that really no one can respond to. It's something that they're doing to themselves. And unless we're willing to invade Russia over Russia attacking Russia, because that's really how it would be looked at in a diplomatic sense, there really is a pretty okay chance that they could do that. However, that is not gauging or weighing in the Russian civil reaction to such a thing. The Russians dropping a tactical nuke on Russian soil would be a pretty drastic measure, and there would be a decent amount of civilian collateral in the form of Russian civilians that would be seen in a tactical nuke being used on Russian soil. I'm not even weighing in the Ukrainian, the use of a tactical nuke on Ukraine, because if the Russians did that, that would start World War III. That's just like the simple equation to that. If they nuke Ukraine, that will start the Third World War. So the Russians' only option is to use it on their own soil. Now, the civil backlash from that could be severe. The political backlash from that could be deadly, as a matter of fact. So that would probably start to heavily relegate the use of a tactical nuclear weapon once again into small percentiles, because the Russian Federation would not want to see the civil outlash of the Russian Federation's government not only nuking the Ukrainian army, but also nuking a great deal of Russian civilians that were caught in the blast and would also end up dying as well. I saw someone earlier try and say that a launch of a tactical nuke is completely indistinguishable from an intercontinental nuke, and so for that reason they wouldn't do that, and that's wildly untrue. The intercontinental ballistic missiles and the tactical nukes are completely different in delivery systems and also their range. It's entirely easy to tell if one is a intercontinental ballistic missile or a tactical nuclear weapon, because a lot of tactical nuclear weapons, crazily enough, are just bombs dropped off the bottom of a plane. So a Russian aircraft could just fly at low altitude up until a couple of miles at the front line, pull up, and then drop the bomb while they're pulling up. I believe that's called an inertia drop, if I'm correct. Someone who may be a pilot can correct me on that. But that's where you use the momentum of the aircraft pulling up to pretty much lob the bomb at a considerable distance, a couple of miles, until it lands on its target and then it explodes. That was generally the doctrine that the Soviet Air Force used for all close air support missions throughout the entirety of the Cold War, and that's why, in terms of close air support, the Soviet Air Force could not do it. They were never trained to do precision bombing. They were always trained to pretty much lob a bomb at the Western forces, because the Soviets assumed that at the outbreak of the conventional war, the Soviet Air Force was just going to be using tactical nuclear weapons from the start. So there was no need to train for precision close air support because there was none needed. You were just going to be flinging tactical nuclear weapons at U.S. forces. So with this in mind, the Russians would probably emphasize a similar doctrine these days to their use of tactical nuclear weapons. So it could just be a gravity bomb, for the large part, that is just flung, lobbed pretty much at the Ukrainians from a distance by an aircraft, and that launch would be undetectable until the bomb exploded. There's also a couple of other variants as well. They could just use a Iskander missile, or a Kinzhal, or a Zircon hypersonic missile, which are nuclear capable, to launch a nuclear weapon into the front lines inside of Kursk. But once again, those launches are totally different than an intercontinental and are very distinct. As a matter of fact, pretty much all of them, considering that all of these strikes would be happening in Russia, would be undetectable by the Ukrainians and by the West until the bomb exploded on Ukrainian forces. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion, but still, the chances of tactical nuclear weapons usage is low. While the percentage may be increasing, we are still talking about marginal percentage increases. So we're going from 1% to 2% or 3%. It's still not wildly high, but it is possibly climbing. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right, and the last question of the segment goes to Ambrester, who said, question for you. Do you think Ukrainian forces will be able to seek and take the Kursk city itself?
I'm highly doubting it. For the Ukrainians to be able to take the city of Kursk, which is 440,000 in size in population figures, that would take a significant armed force or a massive strategic advantage on the battlefield, practically encircling and besieging the city, that I do not think that they'd ever be able to attain. While the R-200 and the E-38 are definitely within their sights, I do not think at this moment that the Kursk city area is going to be under any immediate or direct threat by the armed forces of Ukraine. And also, for that matter, it would be incredibly difficult for a force of Ukraine's size in Russia to be able to take a city like that just because of its absolute size. Also, urban fighting, at least in the Ukrainian war perspective, even for the Ukrainian side, is incredibly dangerous and deadly. And we've never seen, I just want to put this out there, we have never seen the Ukrainians fighting an urban battle on the offensive side. They've always been fighting on the defensive side, and fighting in an urban environment is always going to be a massive defender's advantage. So we do not know how in the world the Ukrainians would perform offensively in urban fighting, and I would assume that it probably would be poorly, because that usually is how everyone performs in urban fighting, unless if you're the United States of America in the middle of the Gulf War, and then you can just do it like it's a miracle. But for everyone else, it probably would be highly unlikely, if not impossible, to do that with the amount of forces that Ukraine has available. But still, a massive $500 donation just came in to the fundraiser. Dang!
From Anonymous. We don't even know who it is.
And the fundraiser is now up to $4,169. Nice. But beyond that, I hope that does address that question well. That was a great question to round this thing out. And with that, it's now time for us to move on into the remainder of the news that we have tonight. And we have a lot of it that we still haven't covered, and we've got to cover. And so with that, check out these Russian drones being jammed today on the front. This is a Russian drone. That's a Ukrainian vehicle. And they're now trying to get the drone down there to the Ukrainian vehicle. And it's getting closer and closer. And it goes out. Very unfortunate.
Oh, man. Kind of like the story of the Russian military at this point. So close, but not quite close enough.
Man, it just gets closer and closer, and then it just goes completely out. We also got to hear as well some more Russian forces getting blown away near Malaya Lignia, which is on the western side of the offensive. But there goes one. Oh!
In a movie-style explosion, of course. They had to go out in spectacular fashion.
Man, is Michael
Oh.
Bay running this war? We see them.
Damn.
We see them hitting more Russian forces. They're running for the hills. Fires roasting everywhere.
Look at it creeping around on his dying breath.
Bleed.
Look at it.
Sad. Very sad indeed. Moving on from that and into next clip, we also got to see the Ukrainians taking down some drones. Check it out. Baby.
Oh, baby. Hey, this is the Frog UK right here. Toad and Frog together again. And they're about to be together again with this, what is this, an Orlan or something?
It looks like a Zala. But
Oh,
also,
Zala.
man, Zala zing, Zala bing. But man, Frog UK is what you call it whenever the British and the French come together to create a weapons project. You just call it Frog UK. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see BTR-4 getting hit on the front lines as well. And check this out. This is one of the few losses that we got to see today on the Ukrainian side. This was also using a Russian fiber optic drone, but it appears that the crew had actually dismounted for a while to take a break. I don't know why, but that was a little bit odd. So the vehicle was lost, but the Ukrainian crew did survive. So that's a bit of a silver lining, but still unfortunate to see a vehicular loss such as that. We did also get to see a Cougar in Kursk, and no, this is not Chris's mom. This is an armored car, and it is pretty cool. This was a part of the 82nd Airborne Brigade. Really cool one. And look at these guys, just such a cool vehicle. Honestly, my favorite version of an MRAP.
Yeah, I like that one too, like the side cargo boxes and stuff. Is that the only thing that pretty much differentiates the Cougar from the normal MRAP?
I think what was your question again?
Is the only thing differentiating a Cougar from a normal MRAP? Is it just the cargo boxes on the side? Because that appears to be the only difference I can see.
I think it's an entirely different body, like that's attached to the thing, because the MATVs are like pickup trucks, and this thing is like a full-bodied van. Like the van part extends all the way back to the rear part of the Cougar. So I think it's just a totally different body that's on this one. And also
Well,
the
that's
Max
a fine-looking Cougar right there. I like that.
Man, it's a great Cougar. An amazing Cougar. You couldn't see Cougars like this even outside of a nightclub in Nashville. I mean, this is truly an amazing one right here. But moving on from that and out and into our next clip, we also got to see a American-provided Abrams in the Kursk Oblast. And the Ukrainians tried to say that these things weren't good. It's like, how come you're using them in Kursk? Checkmate. But look at it. It's a beautiful tank.
I love it. And also, I don't even have to hear the music. They probably got some Alpha Chad edit going on with that. Yep.
Yeah.
The Alpha Chad edit going on.
But that's the end of that clip right there. And moving on from that and into one of our last clips in the Kursk Oblast, we also got to see this really cool vehicle called a Panzerbandwagen 302, which must be Swedish, I'm assuming, moving on through. And there's a Panzerbandwagen with a giant cope cage on top of it, and they are bobbing that thing. Jeez!
Panzerwagen, jumps over the trenches, you know?
Man. And then we also get to see the Ukrainians were conducting a drone attack in Kursk as well. As Matthew likes to call it, the Cub Cadet.
Yeah, the Cub Cadet. You know it.
We hear it again.
You'll never see a people more afraid of a lawnmower sound than the Russians. Oh, bliat, somebody's doing the lawn, bliat. Oh, God. I bet the lawns in Russia are going to go to hell if there were any lawns being kept up after this war is over.
Man, I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you. Oh, and this guy is a Glopnik. Oh, bliat.
Oh. Oh, bliat, they're shooting on the block. Someone said, "What are you doing?" Sounded like somebody said that.
Man, and that's the end of the clip right there. And someone just said something crazy, Matthew. Something crazy in the chat. You for Jim. Do you see it, Matthew? Do you see it? Do you see it?
Oh yeah. I see it.
Man, I don't think he's unhappy over that. I think he's unhappy because I asked him to put $10 on Pump 5. But moving on from that and into the Baltic, we were also able to hear that NATO is boosting its forces within the region after the cable damage that occurred from the Russian ghost ship dragging its nuts over a vital comlink in the Baltic. So it appears that that's going to be something now to consider on in the future, strategically, that is. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the world, we have also been able to hear that apparently an undersea cable had been cut within this area as well, possibly by the Chinese. But before we get on into the Chinese, we do have to talk about a little question that we've asked all of y'all. How will Russia respond to Ukraine's new invasion of mainland Russia in Kursk? Some people are saying it might be IRBM strikes. That really seems to be what everyone's saying right now. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking as well?
All right, so what is the evil goblin Putin going to do to respond to this new invasion of mainland Russia? So 57% said new IRBM missile strikes on Ukraine, while 20% said probably heavy drone strikes, and 10% said a very strong Russian counteroffensive. And I really doubt it's going to be that last option right there because they don't have the ability to do that. So it'll most likely, honestly, unfortunately, in my opinion, it will be another IRBM strike of some sort. We don't know what the target's going to be, but we do know that Russia has closed the airspace around their ICBM launch sites starting on January the 13th for a period of about 3 days or so. So it sounds like maybe they had a contingency plan in place to go ahead and get those launched around that time if Ukraine did go through with their threat to actually invade Kursk. And it looks like, once again, we did see today, Kursk was invaded, so it looks like the IRBMs might be flying sometime this month, unfortunately. So I'm with the 57%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, I would also have to be, jeez, with the 57% as well. I believe that more IRBM strikes are going to be occurring in Ukraine in the future. But moving on from that, and out of that little bit of news, we were also able to hear that another undersea cable had been cut in this area of the world, as we were able to hear that Taiwan is investigating a suspected Chinese link to the cutting of an undersea telecom cable. Authorities intercepted the Chongqing 39. Oddly enough, Chinese-named vessel with an African-based flagging, meaning that this thing is based out of the nation of Cameroon. Y'all can already tell what's going on with this one. But anyways, bad weather prevented boarding, and it continued to South Korea. So Taiwan was not able to stop the vessel today. The ship is linked to a Hong Kong-based company led by a Chinese national. The plot thickens. Taiwan's Chunghwa Telecom confirmed rerouting of traffic to ensure uninterrupted service, and the $500 million Trans-Pacific Express cable has linked countries in East Asia with the United States West Coast since 2008. And authorities are still investigating the incident. But this is the vessel they tried to impound. Looks like shit. Looks like it would be Chinese. And currently it is somewhere around South Korea at this time. They are believing that it dragged an anchor over the telecom cable and pretty much destroyed it. They've rerouted traffic, but they will have to effect repairs to the telecom cable as soon as possible. Still pretty wild to see. And also, how could you not tell that nefarious actions were going to be done on the ship, Matthew? You know what this thing looks like it does as it goes around? It just endlessly goes. It's literally a junk. Like, it looks like junk.
Man, yeah, for real. Honestly, though, with this now happening near Taiwan, we're seeing it happening in the Baltic, and it seems to be Chinese vessels doing this all over the place. I wonder what the actual objective is, because once again, they said they were able to reroute the traffic. I assume the traffic from that telecom cable they were rerouting. I wonder if China's going around and cutting just enough cables so that way if something broke out where they would only have to cut, for example, only one remaining cable to actually cut communications totally out. I wonder if that's the objective. They're simply doing preparations for cutting some redundant cables so that way there are no backups in the case of war.
Maybe that may be the case. But man, you already know what was going on, man. When the Taiwanese Coast Guard tried to board the vessel, they were like, we're going to board you," and the captain on board the ship was like, "Nashawan," like he was like, "No, I do not like that at all." He's like, "No," he's like, "Hell no," but still.
I wouldn't want to get on this vessel right here. I'll just say we're going to take you off the vessel. Everybody on board gets to come with us, and the vessel here is getting sunk today because this is not even this doesn't even look seaworthy.
Dude, that's what they should have said. We're impounding the vessel due to a lack of seaworthiness. That's what they should have said. But if they actually did board the ship, Matthew, the captain would just tell them, "Oh, the ship just started sinking," and they'd be like, "You know what? we think he just did that as sabotage, but looking at the condition of the ship, we can't doubt you on that. Like, it probably is just sinking. But anyways, moving on from that and out of the area of East Asia, as we still have so much to cover, we were able to see that today the Israelis put their military on high alert because of military movements in Western Iran, possibly military exercises. We also were able to see that today, out of the port of Tartus, left a special kind of Russian super sub. It's a Kilo-class diesel-electric submarine. The Russians claim these things are great, although they make a whole lot of noise when the diesel engines are on, because technically, when they run on their electric batteries, they're completely silent. However, while these submarines are completely untraceable according to the Russians, are truly a work of God himself, we were able to see that the Portuguese caught the sub lacking in 4K Ultra HD today because they were able to see it through the periscope as it was leaving the port of Tartus. So much for stealth, because the Portuguese Navy was literally just watching it in the Mediterranean. So, meh. You know, that is what it is. I thought it was hilarious, though, that they literally just held up, I guess, a phone to the periscope in the sub and just snapped a picture of what they were watching. This is literally just a Kilo-class sub. And the Kilo-class sub probably is none the wiser that this Portuguese submarine, the Alvarez Cabral, was just sitting there watching them. Probably didn't even know.
Yeah, probably not. It's just crazy to like see this on camera right here. And what's even crazier is for them to get run out of Syria like this, and to see their sub taken off to leave the area for good. You know, did you mention already where's this thing going?
It's apparently heading to Libya. That's what they're believing at the moment.
Heading to Libya. So yeah, it's heading off to somewhere that's honestly not that important. Honestly, in the strategic sense of things, of course, everywhere's important for human life, but for a strategic sense, honestly, not that important. Unless you disagree, Enforcer.
Well, it's kind of not really important. They're going to try and use it as their jumping base into West Africa, like they were using Syria for that very reason. But I do not think that Libya is going to be as good of a jumping base because it's much farther away from Russia, and you can't really use it as the little hopping point. It pretty much is the end point at this given moment. So I don't really know how effective that's going to end up being. So strategically, I mean, maybe it's effective, or maybe it's going to be a big deal. But I'd generally be on your end. I just don't think it is. Libya is a highly unstable country even right now. And it's not like Syria, where the Assad regime was at least keeping some semblance of control within their region. Libya is a hellhole. Like, Libya is still pretty much an active civil war at this moment. So, and when I mean civil war, I mean it shifts around just about every week. Like, you know, someone could be bombing you in Tripoli by next week. So it's not exactly a really safe or secure location for the Russian forces within West Africa. So I don't know how that's going to go for them, but I'd assume it's probably going to be kind of ineffective for the large part, at least
Do you
in
think
my
the
opinion.
Russians are? Do you think the Russians are trying to go back and sort of like regroup in Libya because maybe they're hoping to spark something between Israel and Egypt, like maybe an armed conflict on the ground of sorts?
Oh no, I would highly doubt that, because Egypt has somewhat, like, yeah, semi-friendly relations with the Russians, but not that much to ever bring the Russians into Egypt. Because if the Russians went into Egypt, America would probably conduct an armed coup of the Egyptian government through the CIA, because the Suez Canal is something that we want to keep Western controlled. It is literally the artery of all major maritime traffic in the modern day and age. So if the Russians started to move towards if the Egyptians started to move towards the Russian side, I have a feeling that some people at the top of the Egyptian government would be dead by next week. Like, I have no doubt about that. Like that. Well, you disagree?
I wasn't going to disagree on that. I was just going to say this, because the main reason I think that the Russians were in Syria is because they were trying to destabilize the Middle East, and they were hoping to do that through Syria. They were letting Syria be a hotbed for terrorists, and also letting Iran move their shipments through Syria to get over to Lebanon, so that way Hamas and Hezbollah could launch more attacks on Israel. So ultimately, Russia knows that the link to the Middle East for the West is through Israel. Israel is the hub, or the nexus, for the West to carry out its objectives in the Middle East, and Russia's trying to subvert that. So, the only reason I'm making this point right here is we did get a report right now, about 10 minutes ago, that Egypt is apparently now conducting military activity in the central Sinai, which is in violation of the peace treaty with Israel, reports Israeli media. So that just came out right now. Once again, we just authorized from the United States the sale of more than $5 billion in military equipment to Egypt. So it comes at a kind of weird time here that they're choosing to do that. And with Russia moving into Libya, which is right next to Egypt, I'm wondering if this is a new strategy for Russia to try to destabilize Israel, to weaken our link in the Middle East.
Maybe. I'm thinking it probably Not probably like the Egyptians. I just don't think. I think they kind of know their kind of spot in the world right now, and if they went that direction, it would go very poorly for them because they don't really get any of the security or protection assurances that any other country gets from the United States. And I have a feeling we'd maul them if they did anything stupid like that. That would be my opinion. I might be wrong on that though, but we'll eventually see. But
It's just weird because Egypt's not exactly what you'd say. Honestly, I haven't really seen Egypt do anything necessarily extremely hostile to Israel, and I don't think we can make the jump just yet to say that violating the peace treaty here with having military activity in Central Sinai. Even where is that, by the way? Like, do we know exactly what part of Egypt that is in?
right here.
Okay, well, that would actually be an issue because that is right next to Israel's border. So I don't know why Egypt would be doing that, honestly, with Israel being right there like that. So you can't rule anything out. I'm kind of with you, Enforcer. I don't think that maybe Egypt is going to do anything too crazy toward Israel, but that is very close to Israel.
I would say it probably isn't going to mean anything. I mean, I think the treaty they're talking about is like 60 years old at this point. It's so old, it pretty much is ancient at this point. And considering the position that Egypt's in these days, which it doesn't do anything aggressive really towards anyone, I would say that this is probably just a military exercise that is nothing. And on top of that, the Israelis are wanting, like, if the Israelis are going to make a big deal out of that, I'm just going to have to be honest with this one. That's pretty stupid because it's not like the Egyptians are like the Egyptians under Nasser back in the 50s or anything like that where they were funding the Fatah. Like, it's not like that time at all. It's a completely different time. The Egyptians are completely uninvolved in internal Israeli affairs with the Palestinians or the Israelis. They just sit back and gather a whopper of amount of cash on the Suez Canal, and that's it. That's all they do. And then they have like a little military coup every like 10 or 15 years or so, like the last one that happened a little while ago. But I just don't think that they're going to do anything to Israel, especially considering their strategic position in the world and also their position on foreign policy towards Israel, towards the rest of the Middle East, and towards the United States. That would just be suicidal for them. And they know that it would end badly, like especially in the current situation that exists in the world today. But with that, we do have to make sure to move on from this segment because we have loads of Ukraine war news to cover still. And moving on from that and into the area around Kyiv, we were able to see the air defense report overnight. 42 Shahed drones were shot down. What a number. They didn't have a high interception rate, mind you. They had about a 60% interception rate in total across the entirety of the air defense raid last night by the Russians, but still not bad. Moving on into our location unknowns, we were also able to see them shooting down some drones. With Chad music ensuing, you gotta have Chad music, but look at him obliterate those drones.
Oh, smashing those drones so good. You've never seen a drone smashed quite like this.
Man.
Don't do the voice or you're going to start coughing.
Yeah, I know. I was wanting to do it, and I was like, nah, I'm not even going to try.
This isn't for lightweights. It's not for lightweights. You got to make sure you got your head on your shoulders when you talk like this.
Man, you're going to sit there and keep on enticing me to want to talk like that, man. Like, dang. It's torture, man. Like, you can hardly talk. And then you're going to do a voice. You know I like doing voices. You just torture.
You got to learn to have a little self-control. They don't teach that in schools these days. Self-control, a little bit of, some of that.
Man, I'm telling you. But moving on from that and into the next clip, we also got to see the aftermath of a Ukrainian drone strike on a Russian position. Haha, блядь.
Нет, кабина загорелась. Бля, он сейчас так и будет гореть, но там еще мины взорвутся по-любому, блядь. Мина не нагревается? Да, он нагреется, блядь, въебет.
And that thing is, that thing's really toasting out. And that's the end of that clip. And moving on from that and into our next one, we were also able to see a Ukrainian soldier just barely get missed by some Russian artillery. We can see he's got the shotty out as they're doing a little air defense patrol. Oh!
Damn, son.
He's legging it.
Run. Like, zoing, Scoop. Take off for running. Roll, Raggy. Bomb.
Like, Zoink Scoop, I think we're about to get bombed. Run, real raggy, run. I can't believe I did that without coughing. That was a miracle. I could feel it coming on, too. But anyways, we get to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and holy moly!
Moly. We got 2 Bobcat skid steers, and of course, one bot had to show up in the comments and say, "Source, trust me, bro." No, this is literally, the source is called the Kyiv Independent. Do your reading, good sir. But it looks like 2 Bobcats. Enforcer, tell us more.
Man, a literal bot created like yesterday. Its name is 123 Shona with 7 following and 3 followers.
Damn, man, that's a Pee-wee account right there. It's almost as low as the hot dog man's.
Man, dude, that's actually lower. I think that's a disgrace right there. But moving on into the losses, because the losses were high. Unfortunately, I do not see Ms. Disa, keeper of the records, in the comment section on this post. Unfortunately, I think it's the first time in hundreds of days that that's been the case. But beyond that, the losses were still significant, with 1,730 Russian soldiers and North Koreans wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 26 APCs, 97 supply trucks, 7 main battle tanks, 25 artillery pieces, 91 drones, and 2 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, the losses were pretty good, and we love to see that the Russian Federation continues to take significant losses at the hands of the armed forces of Ukraine. Moving on from that and into the Vovchansk area, we were also able to see that an entire commander of the Storm Ossetia Battalion was taken out really nice and easy like today. This is an FPV drone. Now, and here comes the car with a commander in it. Matthew, what's going to happen?
Let's just put it this way. Prank them, John.
You already know it. Skirt! And they flipped. They didn't even bomb them. They killed themselves. Crazy.
No, they just rolled over. They didn't. Nothing horrible happened. They just rolled over.
No, they didn't do any of that. I'm just kidding with y'all. They just flipped the car at like 100 miles an hour 5 times. They're fine. They were wearing seatbelts. But the FPV drone, it continues to hover around. The car is smoking. Beyond that, though, it's fine. Whoa, what's this? Oh, the drones. Oh, my goodness. Well. Oh, wow. Folks.
Also, by the way, Miss Disa says they deleted her post with the reply. What? Are you kidding? They deleted the post with the reply on it. So I see what you're saying now. That's a shame. Like, the Kyiv Independent's been having a rough time with the loss reports over the last couple of days. So maybe they'll get better with it, but I guess they deleted it.
Man, they're getting offended with being corrected so much. I just got to say this though, because I'm always going to come to the defense of the folks in the LSA over anyone else. Maybe the Kyiv Independent ought to stop having so many typos, since the MOD literally just puts out the numbers and they just have to copy and paste them instead of deleting your post, correcting the typos. I think that would be probably a better solution. But I don't know. We just run a channel here. I don't know much of anything about that kind of stuff. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip. Also, by the way, Miss Disa, let me know any follow-ups that you would like about that, because to be quite honest with you, considering that you're doing more work at this point than the Kyiv Independent, and usually you're having to find multiple flaws with their updates, let us know what your position is on that in the end, because if it's not a good one, we're going to just completely axe the Kyiv Independence casualty report from the show and just go find a new one, because they've been having enough typos lately that you're pretty much the person who has to put out the casualty report anyways. So if you have a better recommendation than the Kyiv Independent, we'd be all ears. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip, where we got to see the 92nd Brigade was taking out Russian forces. Oh, we're going to be muting the cyber music.
This is the Shrike 10. Oh. And they strike them.
And also, Koljak said they should hire her as a quality checker. I'll be honest with you. Here's been our experience with anyone who works in the Ukrainian media world. They're too big for their own good. So when someone sits there and says, I'm like, hey, like, your numbers are wrong, they'll just say something like, kiss my ass, or something like that, and they'll just say the rudest thing when they're actually wrong. Like we've dealt with that with someone who was working on the Twitter account of a certain big group that works with Ukraine that actually is officially connected to the Ukrainian government, and they wanted to turn into a smartass towards us on Twitter just for no reason. Like, that's generally been our experience with anyone and everyone who works in the Ukraine world in particular on YouTube, is that some of them are really cool and chill, like Civdiv, and then others are just like, they get too big in their heads for their own good. And I think with the Kyiv Independent deleting Miss Deese's post, which is always accurate, mind you, because I've checked it, I've double-checked Miss Deese's numbers, and she always has them right per the MOD reports. That's a very asshole kind of a thing to do, what they did to Miss Deese's post. But anyways, moving on from that and into the next one at Svatove, we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting some posts behind the lines with some drone bombs. Also, someone said, all of Ukrainian media? Well, there's a good amount of it. Like I'm not gonna lie, like for some reason when people cover the Ukraine war, for some reason their heads get 10 times bigger than what they are. Like on our show, I know that we have a big following, but Matthew and me are just two people. Like, yeah, I know a good bit about history, but that I'm still a person at the end of the day, and I could be wrong. I'll still sometimes be a little snark with people, like earlier on the stream when someone wanted to say that a light brigade obviously is going to be equipped as much as a mechanized brigade, which makes no sense. But whenever you deal with people in this segment, for some reason, some of them start to think that they're like gods and they just can't be wrong. And if they're wrong, they're offended. And they can literally just be wrong. You know, like it's not even just a disagreement. It's a factual fallacy. And they'll get offended if that's brought up. Like that happens a good bit. So
Honestly, that's that like hyper aggressive segment of the pro-Ukraine support community. It's not everybody, by the way. I think they're actually a smaller group than we think. They're just very, very vocal, and most of the time they're vocal in a sort of bad way. Like I'm talking about the extreme pro-Ukraine supporters. Nothing wrong with supporting Ukraine. Obviously, we support Ukraine here on the channel. But like for example, today I saw a lot of people going on the attack on Lex Fridman simply because he was proposing in the interview that maybe Zelensky should meet with Putin to discuss peace. While we may not agree with that, me personally, I don't think it's going to be very productive to do that. And also, I understand why Zelensky wouldn't want to meet with him. It was just a question. And many people decided to eviscerate Lex Fridman, call him a Russian supporter, and all kinds of other stuff, simply for asking the question. And that's how you turn someone from a pro-Ukraine supporter, potentially, to a pro-Russian supporter, is by attacking the hell out of them and turning them into an enemy. That's not the way to do it.
But man, you know what was funny about the Lex Fridman thing? People were tearing him down from every direction. Like some people were like, you weren't just hating on Zelensky the whole interview. Screw you. And then others were like, you dare to ask for peace negotiations? You asshole. I was like, he couldn't win either way. Like if he just I honestly think it was fine. You know, he has his leaning, everyone knows, but it wasn't like he was going out of his way to just hammer him and try and paint Ukraine to be devils and demons, but he also wasn't going out of his way to try and paint him as saints either. I personally feel like it wasn't that bad of an interview. I mean, at least it wasn't as horrendous as Tucker Carlson going and interviewing Putin. That was literally just bootlicking, like personified. That was a horrific interview because it was not unbiased. It was as biased as it could be in the Russian direction. That was not a fair interview. The Fridman interview, in my opinion, it was fairly decent. I couldn't find that much to complain about it. I was hearing it though while Matthew was listening to it, right next to me, and I was working, so I didn't get to pay a lot of attention to it. But to me, I didn't hear anything that was just glaringly bad from either direction. Zelensky's answers were pretty good. Fridman's answers, while leaning more towards trying to get to a peace agreement, really at any cost, still good questions. I didn't think it was that bad. But anyways, moving on.
I think that the Lex fella asked questions that I was honestly not expecting him to ask Zelensky. They were hard questions and questions that some people might be like, how dare him ask that question? But they're the questions that you need to ask if you're trying to be like a real journalist. You need to ask those tough questions that people are scared to ask to hear the response. And he actually handled Zelensky pretty well, because at one point Zelensky was getting frustrated with some of the questions. You could tell he was getting a little bit sarcastic and honestly kind of on the verge of being a little bit belligerent with Lex. But you couldn't really quite pick it up because he was speaking in different languages. But the translation sort of picked it up a bit. And they generally kept things cordial, even though it got kind of heated at parts of it, which was respectable. Because it could have run off the rails if either one of them decided to get, angry or belligerent or go crazy or something like that. So generally, pretty good for free speech compared to Putin, who had Tucky G so scared to say anything, he was sitting there quiet as a mouse.
Man, are you a clown or a real reporter? Then shut up and let me go on my 30-minute rant about nothing. Dude, it's like...
And your answer could put you in Russian jail for the next 10 years if you're not careful.
Yeah, this interview was far better than the Tucky G Putin interview. I think everyone can agree with that, hopefully. But still, we can see here the Ukrainians taking out some drones in the Seversk direction. Really more so the Kremena direction, but kind of counts. And we can see them trying to go after the drone. The drone's actually pulling off some evasive maneuvers. It's being a little slippery. This is rare. Usually they just fly in a straight line, largely unaware. But we can see once again, for some reason, this Zala has gained awareness. Also, AF Kaplan said, that's not a very high bar. No, not really. Like, the Tucker Carlson Putin interview is about as bad as an interview could go. Like, if you're looking for an unbiased, actual questioning, it was terrible. Like, it was horrendous. It was one of the worst I've ever seen. But moving on from that and into Seversk, we did get to see the commander of the 54th riding a horse near to the front. You don't see this much.
Перейшли на гужовий транспорт. У зв'язку з тим, що наше паливо парафініться, тому що воно дуже низької якості, переходимо на гужовий транспорт. Так що бронегрупа буде тепер на конях. Це, звичайно, жарт, але всім доброго вечора. Я відпочиваю і ви відпочивайте. Разом до перемоги. Слава Україні!
Слава Ukraine, Slav.
Man, this guy's out here like it's the old Cossack days in the 17th century. Man, pretty cool, honestly. This was not being used in frontline service, by the way. He was just kind of goofing off behind the lines, riding a horse. Don't want anyone to be thinking that they're about to be conducting a cavalry charge on Russian positions near Verkno-Kamyanka. But moving on from that, we also got to see some foreign fighters in the area as well.
Bueno, muchachos, ¿cómo se sintió en el trinchera?
Bendecido, bendecido. Excelente, gracias a Dios.
¿Seguro?
Excelentemente bien.
Ahí la fantasma.
What country are they from?
Apparently from some South American country. I was wanting to say that they were the Colombian or Brazilian volunteers, but I don't know for certain, unfortunately.
Excelente, mi teniente. Velo, mi teniente.
Yodora nunca te abandona.
Jamás. Melo, melo, melo.
Yellow mellow.
Excelente. Todo bien.
Dale, las palabras.
Just for y'all to know, the reason why I said they're either Colombians or Brazilians is because those are the largest Latin American volunteer contingents currently involved in the conflict are from either Colombia or Brazil. There really isn't a large representation of other groups. Like, there are some Peruvians and Chileans and Argentinians and such, but not in incredibly large numbers like you see Colombians. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. Colombians. Yeah, they're Colombians. So these are the Colombian volunteers.
Interesting. And what's the vehicle they're sitting in? Some type of, like, transport truck or something?
I think it's a Ural. It looks a lot like a Ural, I would say.
There's a lot of guys fitting that truck right there.
Man, they're packing them in. But that's kind of what the transport trucks are for.
Chao, chao, cuidan, chiquillos.
And that's the end of the clip right there. And also, all of y'all were bringing up a good point. Y'all were like, they're speaking Spanish. It wasn't registering to me until literally like the last second. I was like, oh yeah, Brazilians speak Portuguese. And I should have been able to pick up on that, but I didn't. But these are the Colombians. So with that, we are now moving on into our next clip near Bakhmut. And we can see a Ukrainian helicopter conducting a little fire support mission. Isn't this cool? And here comes another one. And
they're doing that same old tactic yet again.
Man, the tried and true helicopter pilots at the beginning of the war were like, yes, I'm going to be able to do super cool oil tanker raids on Belgorod. Yippee! 3 years in, please, for the love of God, stop giving me indirect rocket support missions. It's like the only missions that helicopter pilots do in the war on both sides. It's just indirect fire support missions every single time. I've never seen another mission ever from this point, like 2 years ago, well, 3 years ago at this point on. But anyways, we also got to see some Su-25s pretty much doing the same thing. The
same thing? What the hell? They got the helicopters and the jets doing it? Oh my god.
Man, it's just the name of the game these days. Indirect fire support missions. Also, that is a cool patch.
Man, I like that. That's pretty cool right there. I like that shark's looking a little bit wild. That nose in that shark is freaking out of this world, but it's cool.
Dude, that eagle's going squaw, and the shark's going or something like that. It's like, I don't know what the hell that face is on that shark, man, but it's not normal.
That's not Jabba Jaw, that's for sure.
Dude, that thing said, who, me? And then got impaled with or something like that. Like, that thing's looking bad. Still, patch goes hard, but that shark, though, man, that thing, I think they need to have that redesigned. and that schnoz, Dude, that's not even a nose. Like, it's not even like a shark's nose. That's like a human nose on that thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Dude, no, dude, knowing that, he's probably going, ah, or something like that, like, it's because of the giant nose. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip down in Turetsk, we did get to see some little firing on Russian forces by an MLRS. Chad music ensues.
This is the National Police?
This is the police. Whoop, whoop. Dang.
Man, I wonder if they when they fire the missile, they're like, less lethal, less lethal.
he's got a knife. Like, and then they fire like 7 miles away.
The obligatory, stop resisting, stop resisting.
Get in the car! Get in the car! No! Screw you, pig! I got pepper spray. Do I need to spray him? Get in the car or we're gonna pepper spray you. Screw you, pig! Spray him. Psst. Ah! And then they like push him in the car or something like that. Dude, I've watched so many body cam clips. It always goes the same way with people nowadays. Like, over the past year, like, every single body cam clip that comes out, everyone's like, screw you, cop, I hate you, and then they're like, get in the car, and then they won't get in the car, and then they're like, listen, we're gonna spray you with pepper spray if you don't get in that freaking car, and then they'll be like, screw you, man, and then they spray him, and then they go, ah, ah, or something like that, and then they just push him in the car and close the door. Like, it is, but I'm not gonna lie, dude, it is the funniest thing, because these people always act like they're really hardcore until they get sprayed, and then they just start screaming and crying, and it's like, why, like, I don't know what it is with people. I just want to say this really quickly, folks. I don't know what it is with most people's mentality on body cam footage when they get arrested. It's like, you are in cuffs now. You are going to jail. Like, it's like, what is the point of fighting getting in the car? Like, just get in the car. You're going to jail at this point. There's no question about it. It's not like you're going to break free. So just avoid the pepper spraying and just, you know, get in the car. Like, that would be my take. That would be what I would think would be logical. But no, these people always fight getting in the car. Don't know why. Doesn't make sense to me. But anyways, moving on from that and down to the area around Pokrovsk, we also got to see some Russians driving past some destroyed equipment. And so with that, here's the clip. There's quite a lot of destroyed equipment around here. Ooh, cooked up stuff.
Toasted or roasted. How long would you like this toasted, sir? Leave it in there until it's charred and burned to a crisp. I want it seared.
Oh, my tank is burnt. Who cooked this? Brings in a Gopnik wearing like an Adidas tracksuit. Benito, my friend, amazing. It's like that's what the Russians do, man. They cook them. But moving on from that and down the line to Kurkove, we also got to see some more Russians getting hit down here. Oh, we got that nursery rhyme music playing now. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. The Ukrainian drone going to slam in your face, knock you out, all about, put you in a nice pine box, send you back to Volokholamsk to get put 6 feet under. Bless your soul.
Pine box would be a charge of 200,000 rubles. Pine box costs extra. You get no box free.
And your family gets a chocolate cake or something like that. But anyways, we see them still hitting them. Man, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I can actually use more vocal range now. I don't know if the cough is finally going away, but I'm finally able to like at least inflect my voice a little bit.
I wouldn't inflect it too much. You're gonna fall right back into it, and then you're gonna be like, "Oh man, I can't run a stream." Maybe better keep it low.
Man, I better keep it low. I better keep it low for real. But we did get to see some air defense fire in Taganrog as well. Check this out.
Oh my god.
Man. I can't tell if she's laughing or crying.
Ебать, там что-то горит. Там что-то горит.
I think she's hysterical.
This woman's delusional. Send her to the infirmary.
The alternative of the male response. Oh, my God.
Dude, the woman's like, oh my God. He's just like, oh, damn. He's like,
oh, wow.
Man, dude, this guy couldn't be bothered. He's just like, damn. Wow, look at that. Like, it's
Bro,
like,
that's crazy.
dude, he's literally about to just go back in because it's too boring for him and go back to watching TV or something, man.
Над нами это сбивают ракеты сейчас. Или что не сбивают? Ёбаный рот, смотри, сколько летит.
Dude, this guy's tone is really like, wow, look at that, damn. You know, he's just like, oh, that's something.
Вон еще полетел. Да я вижу. Лень, прям над нами ебашит.
Dang, that's a lot of air defense fire as well.
Я ебу, может надо зайти. Летит.
Let's see, we have to блять.
Офигеть.
This guy's the chillest I ever heard, man. He's just like, that's it. But anyways, moving on from that, and out of Taganrog, it's now time for us to move on to the main event of the night, which is a speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. So, without further ado, folks, here it is. I don't know why in the world he looked like... I don't know why in the world he looked like he was about to cry in the first thumbnail. Let me refresh that. Why does it look like he's about to bust out crying in that thumbnail?
Bro, I'm not going to lie. He's looking a little bit rough in that first one right there. I think the Lex Fridman interview might have done him in.
Dude, this was before the Lex Fridman interview, man. He's sitting here in the thumbnail looking like he's about to say, chat would have cooked. It's like, bro, don't look like that. You're not going to give people hope. But anyways, without further ado, here is the speech for President Volodymyr Zelensky. Speech.
Дорогі українці, українки, зараз тривають рятувальні роботи у Свесі, у селищі в Сумській області після удару російських бомб. Влучання в будинок, зруйнований під'їзд, квартири з 1 по 5 поверхи. Пошкоджені також сусідні будинки. Ще один російський удар по життю звичайних українських сімей. 7 людей поранені, серед них дитина, дівчинка, 2 роки їй зараз знаходиться в лікарні. Всім постраждалим надається необхідна допомога. Були сьогодні також удари керованими авіабомбами по іншим селам нашої Сумщини, по Миропіллю, по Вільній Слободі, а також по Харківщині. Сьогодні ж завершилась рятувальна операція в Чернігові після ракетного удару. Там більше 40 будинків і будівель були зруйновані та пошкоджені. На жаль, в Чернігові був загиблий. Мої співчуття. І це незмінне завдання посилювати нашу ППО. Зараз вже готуємось до зустрічі в Рамштайні. На цей тиждень запланована зустріч. Десятки країн-партнерів, і серед них є ті, хто може збільшити нашу спроможність не тільки у захисті від ракет, але й у захисті від керованих бомб, від російської авіації. Будемо про це з ними говорити, будемо переконувати, життя потребує захисту тут і зараз в Україні. І системи ППО мають для цього працювати. Я хочу подякувати всім партнерам, які це розуміють і які допомагають нам із розвитком повітряного щита. Сьогодні ж детально доповідав головком Сирський щодо наших дій на фронті. По всій лінії фронту тривають жорсткі бої, найбільш гаряче на Покровському напрямку. Окупант продовжує витрачати шалену кількість своїх людей в штурмах. І я дякую кожному нашому підрозділу, всім нашим бригадам, які захищають українські позиції та забезпечують знищення окупанта. Головком доповів також по ситуації в Курській області, зокрема, в боях сьогодні та вчора в районі тільки одного села Махновка на Курщині російська армія втратила до батальйону піхоти північно-корейських солдатів і російських десантників. І це відчутно. Загалом я хочу відзначити за професійні та результативні дії наших воїнів сил спеціальних операцій та 80-ту окрему десантно-штурмову бригаду. Ми маємо всі пам'ятати, щодня тривають бойові дії, щодня Росія завдає терористичних ударів. Щодня маємо підтримувати нашу армію, всі наші сили оборони та безпеки України, бути активними у відносинах з партнерами, не втрачати зв'язків і будувати нові, а також збільшувати наше власне оборонне виробництво та залучати необхідну оборонну допомогу. Кожного тижня потрібен новий результат. І, безумовно, в цьому році буде багато дипломатії, і Україна більше за всіх прагне миру. Справжня дипломатія така, яка нам потрібна, може базуватись тільки на наших сильних позиціях. Безумовно, нашої армії, усього нашого народу, нашої держави. Дякую всім, хто посилює Україну. Слава Україні!
And Heroam
Heroam
Slava.
Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1047 of the war. And that is going to be moving us on into the second segment of this stream where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. Hang on one second. It is going to be an incredibly fun segment, a great segment, because we get to talk to y'all. And luckily, my cough has not been that bad tonight. And it doesn't seem like it's going to be getting worse. I'm just kind of having to try and battle it right now at the moment for some reason. I don't know why it's starting to flare up a little bit right here. But beyond that, we will get to chit-chat with y'all because tonight's news segment has actually been pretty freaking long. It's been 2.5 hours long. So we're going to take a little time to sit back with y'all, answer questions, and chit-chat about all the fun things that all of us like to talk about, which is literally anything and everything. But still, Matthew, take it away. Have we had any top donors in between the last segment where we called out the top donors and now? And also, Matthew, also one more big thing. What's the answers that people have been throwing in to that question that we've asked everyone? Please take it away.
Yes, you know your poll segment well. And this poll right here says another Chinese ship is accused of cutting a key subsea cable near Taiwan. What is China's goal with all these cables being cut around the world? So 48% said to eliminate the backup systems, while 43% said to simply cause fear and chaos in the West, and 2% said China has no goal and it's accidents. And honestly, I'm going to have to go with the ominous option. I think they're trying to eliminate our backup systems. Some of these cables have redundancies, and that's how they're able to reroute the traffic. But once you cut out the backup and the redundant cable, which it appears to be China is currently doing right now, that creates a very, very bad situation in the event of war. If the main cable is cut, then you're out of luck. You no longer have a connection to the cable and the subsea cables at all. So I'm with the 48%. I think that's what they're currently doing, and they're preparing for something, but it's unclear exactly what. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, in my honest opinion, it most likely is that they're eliminating backup systems. That would be what I would have to believe, because it's a little bit odd how Chinese vessels are involved in all of these incidents and how they're continuously severing more and more of these cables until we're getting down to the backup cables. This is something that I believe is a trend for a reason, and we should start to consider this a major strategic risk to the Western world at large if they continue these kinds of activities. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, do we have any top donors in between the last segment and this one?
Yes, we do. And also to recap our current fundraising number, we're at $4,301 raised of that $2,500 goal. So well above the goal tonight. Tremendous to see once again. And in the meantime, we did have that 500 from Anonymous. We don't know who put that in, but huge shout out to whoever did that. One of the largest ones of the night, actually. Also a 100 from Active Vista, as well as Linda de Solinares, who put in a 50, along with Captain Ted, who also put in a 50 as well. And that is actually all the top donors we've had since the last time we called them out. And once again, huge shout out to you for helping us to reach $4,301 raised. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, $3,400 raised. Absolutely, $4,300 raised, actually. Sorry, correction there. I got the numbers reversed. Absolutely crazy to think about. It's almost $2,000 above the fundraiser goal that we had tonight. It's almost 200% more than what we were originally anticipating the fundraise for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. And it truly is incredible, folks, that you all continue to support these fundraisers and help them out year after year, week after week. We've been able to make sure that the Elite Spring Army is one of the largest fundraising groups on the internet in support of Ukraine. We have been able to support people and actually make a difference out there. And it's amazing and incredible to think that that's been the case. Really, I truly do think it is. Because many of y'all know that we've continued to stay with our original fundraising prerogatives since the beginning of the stream. Back in the day, we said we were the only people who said this, and it turned out that that was a bit of a blessing. That we were only going to support fundraisers through YouTube Give, and they were only going to be 501c nonprofits, because YouTube Give only allows us to pick registered 501c nonprofits here inside the United States. Now, many people might understand this. Many people might not. But we've ended up avoiding a lot of disasters over the course of the years because of that decision. For some reason, I don't know why, I just wanted to share this with y'all tonight. Many of y'all may or may not know about the Georgian Legion. You know about that, Matthew?
What about them?
You know, the whole fundraiser thing that they did out there on the internet, and it turned out that there wasn't even a Georgian Legion that was receiving the money.
I honestly don't know enough about that situation to actually comment on it.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, it absolutely destroyed a lot of the NAFO community when it happened, because I believe it came out in the wash after a little while that pretty much all that was true. So there was something a little interesting to hear, and that there was something that I was very happy that we didn't end up. Well, that's not the only thing. There was a lot of other instances like that Vasquez guy at the beginning of the war. That really makes it quite obvious why you know it's good to go with the legal route of supporting registered 501 nonprofits instead of supporting Tom, Dick, and Harry, who just opened up their own nonprofit that nobody knows anything about and is legally not fiduciary obligated to do nothing. But anyways, I hope that this addressed that well, because I remember one time, I just want to say this really quickly. I remember one time that we were given real shit by people. They were like, why? How come these people only support YouTube humanitarian nonprofits through YouTube Give? How come they aren't supporting upstanding people like the Georgian Legion? And then all that came out. And then I was like, well, I'm very glad that we didn't, because that wouldn't have gone well. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Not trying to step on anyone's toes here, not trying to break the balls. I'm just trying to tell y'all what the hell the score is. But anyways, also, Matthew, you want to know why I did that voice? Is because I heard today, I got to go show you this. I found someone who created Al Capone's voice. Like, this is using a family member of Al Capone. They recreated his voice exactly as it was, and I listened to it, and I was like, this is the most stereotypical mob boss sounding thing ever. So I'm going to play it for you really quickly, because when you listen to it, Matthew, you're going to be like, that sounds like any stereotypical mob boss in any movie ever. But here you go.
I came to Chicago with $40 in my pocket. My son is now 12. I'm still married, and I love my wife dearly.
Like, that is the most mob boss sounding mob boss person like ever.
He really does. It sounds just like it. And the phone even adds some more to it, like that phone effect.
Yeah, like someone went out of their way to go find Al Capone's surviving family that actually knew him when he was alive and like talked to him and stuff, and went and got a whole bunch of voice actors and stuff to start trying to recreate the voice. And so eventually, after a while, they ironed it down to where the family member was like, yeah, that's him. And also another thing that was really lucky is that they actually had another surviving family member who was like a relative of Capone's that was still alive too. And there was an actual audio recording of him when he was younger, and the relative was like, yeah, they actually sounded identical to each other. So they went and got his voice recording when it was younger, got a voice actor that sounded a lot like that, and then like did some, other fixing to the voice actor's instructions. We're like, okay, read the lines. So apparently that's the closest to what Al Capone actually sounded like. And so I heard that today, man, and I've been thinking about that. I was poor then and younger and all that crap, and I was like, dude, that guy literally sounded like every mob boss that's ever been a stereotype from then to now. I guess that's where the stereotype came from.
I guess so. It sounds pretty good though. It's pretty close.
Yeah, man. It like, dude, I gotta tell you, man, that's crazy, man. That guy was sitting there walking around, probably sounding like that, telling people, "Listen, I'm gonna blow up your speakeasy if you don't buy my liquor." It's like, who in the world would take that guy seriously, man? Like, like just having this random guy walk in with maybe a goon or two standing around him. I'd be like, dude, you sound like a joke. I would get shot. Like, I would just get shot, man. But I would still be like, I can't take you seriously. You don't even sound menacing. You sound like a goof. But anyways. What? What?
You're the only person I know that's ever said, like, if the mob boss walked in and said something in his, like, normal, like, accent, I can't take you seriously. You're a goof. I'd be like, okay, then, all right.
Man, I'd be gunned
down hard.
I'd be gunned down right there, man. Because, dude, like, could you take him seriously, though, man, if he came and he said, I came to this city with $40, and you got to sit here, you got to pay me protection fees. You'd be like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? Like, you sound like a joke. Like, that's what I would be saying. I don't know. Maybe you'd be like, yes, Mr. Capone. Like, I just couldn't take him seriously, though.
if I was trying to ward off a mob boss from my place and they came into my business or something like that and they walked in, I was like, oh, damn, it's the mob boss. I would just simply shout over to an employee or something like that and be like, hey, hey, Muggsy, when's the IRS stopping by? Are they stopping by later today or tomorrow? And watch how fast they run out of that speakeasy. They run out of there so fast, it'll be making your head spin.
Dude, better yet, sit there and say, hey, actually, I get someone you might want to talk to right now. Hey, Jimmy, come here. Jimmy's in the IRS. Dude, he would run around and run away. Like, he would be out of Chicago or something. But anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed that because that's been on my mind all day since I heard it earlier today. But anyways, also, that's one weird bot right there. There you go. See you around. But anyways, with that, Matthew, what do we got for some questions? I understand we might have some interesting questions.
So we do have some interesting questions here. And of course, up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight, we had the whole roster, like always. We had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J., Paul Schultz, David Millsap for Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the LSA Morse code decipher says Ukraine is once again on the march to Kursk. And hopefully, it'll be a short one. LLT, LSA.
And ding, 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 ding. Oh, I'm going to start coughing there. That's the sound of money. And y'all got that dent on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all amazingly for getting that correct again on the 1047th day of the war. How impressive indeed. And I got to say that it is an amazing, incredible thing to know that y'all continue to get that right time and time again, because y'all continue to show the world that we have a Morse code deciphering unit, and they do it well. They do it really well. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. I hope that's like a good Californian accent. Like, I only heard like one person out there that spoke like that.
Californian?
Well, yeah, you know how they talk like all nasally and stuff, like some of them do at least.
I think you think about New Jersey. I don't think it's California.
No, I was thinking about California all the way, man. Like, maybe I can't do it well, but, like, there's some people out there who talk nasal, like, you know?
I don't remember that.
Maybe, well, how do you remember him talking?
You know, kind of like, you know, where's my avocado toast? Kind of like that.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of fair. Yeah, that kind of was some of them.
You gotta put on the most urban accent ever. Like, you know, just the average, like, city dweller type, you know.
Where's my avocado toast? Something like that?
Excuse me, sir, where's my avocado toast? Do you know where that is? Like, can you tell me where the avocado toast is, sir? Excuse me?
You know, man, when you think about it...
I'm not mocking Californians, by the way. I have no idea how y'all sound. I'm just doing this for the hell of it, so don't take offense.
Miss Deesa got it. Miss Deesa said, you're thinking Valley speak. That's exactly what I was talking about right there. Yeah, the Valley people. Like, there was, like, one person we ran into out there that sounded like that, and I remembered it, because I was like, that's, like, the accent. Like, they did it on SNL. Oh, like, just to let y'all know. Like, they were, like, it was, like, a skit, Matthew, where they acted like they were Californians, and everyone talked like that. And I was like, I guess that's what some Californians talk like. And then we went out there and I heard one, and that was enough for me to be like, that's what Californians must talk like. Miss Deesa said, watch the Californians on SNL. That's exactly what I was talking about, yeah. But let's see. Someone else said, let's see, LA accent, LMA. That's exactly what I was going for. Yeah, that's what I was imitating. But we didn't hear that a lot in LA. Like, I only heard it from one person. And, like, it was just kind of like a periphery person, too. But beyond that...
the most common accent I heard in L.A. was just, you know, these people would walk up and down the sidewalks. I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was just something along the lines of, and stuff like that. Just crazy stuff going up and down the sidewalk, especially in Hollywood. Just a lot of crazy stuff. A lot of hacking and yakking going on the sidewalks and stuff like that. And you're like, this is kind of interesting, kind of nasty up here near the Hollywood area.
Nah, man, you just be standing there, you know what I mean? And you'd be in West Hollywood. Or Hollywood itself, up here near the Hollywood Walk of Fame on Hollywood Boulevard. You'd just be standing there. You'd see someone coming up. They were like a street performer. They wore like these clothes that looked like rags. And they'd be like shaking stuff. And they'd be like, pitch it all up, you know what I mean? And you'd be like, okay, like, I think this person's crazy. Like, it's like, they're putting on a good act. Like, you would think they're crazy. I think they may have been crazy. But, like, there was a lot of people up in Hollywood like that, man. Like, you know, like, they were sitting there, man. They'd be like, lizard! Eat my shit. And I was like, I don't know what's up with this guy.
I don't know why, but I've never actually, like, even walking through Birmingham, I think once or twice I might have, like, had an encounter, but it was very, like, short-lived. I have like a natural repellent to crazy people. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I just look serious or something like that, and people just like, okay, the crazy people think I'm not going to say anything to him. Maybe he looks like he could go off or something like that. I don't know. Like maybe I look kind of mean or something like that. I have no idea. But even out in LA, like I didn't really have any encounters with the crazy people out there. Like even when I went out separately from you, Enforcer, I didn't really have any of those, and they were around. Like you just like observed them, but they didn't actually interact with you. I saw them like harassing everybody else. I'm like, oh, that's weird. They don't mess with me. That's a good thing, but I don't know why.
Man, I was putting on my straightest game face. I never got messed with by any of those people too, because whenever I was getting out in the streets, I would put on a face like I was just ready to beat someone if they messed with me. So I never got messed with by anyone. I never got messed with by the Mickeys or like the hustlers trying to sell you food or the people who were like just trying to like corral you in or the crazy homeless people. I didn't get messed with any of them, but I also would never stop near them. I just keep walking. So like
Someone sent the live chat, by the way. You must blend in. Oh, no, I couldn't. Maybe I'm crazy. No. I don't know it. Maybe I'm walking through the crazies and I'm actually looking like one of them. I'm crazy myself. I don't have a clue. And I'm like, why aren't they messing with me? And there's like, hello, brother. I'm like, oh, excuse me? What'd you say?
You know, Matthew, all that twitching that you do, that might actually be what's up, you know?
All that twitching? What do you mean that twitching?
Yeah, I'm just playing. Someone's about to be like, Matthew twitches. No, he doesn't. Like, no, he does not twitch. But yeah, look, we'd have to be like the complete opposite of blending in. I mean, like we wear polos everywhere and like plaid shorts. Well, we don't wear plaid shorts, but we wear like yachting shorts. Like we couldn't blend in. Like I don't know what it is.
Shorts.
Yeah, I don't know how the hell to describe, Matthew. I don't know. Regular shorts. Like, but
man,
they're
not like normal khaki shorts, man. They're not no yachting. What the hell's a yachting short?
Well, it's kind of the fit that we have because I wear Nauticas. Though I think those are like yachting shorts or something.
No, man, that's not no yachting short. That's just the brand image they try to put forward. Those are just like normal cargo pants, like cargo shorts or something like that. That's not. I mean, man, yachting shorts would be like those like plaid, like uppity, like stuff like that. I don't even know what would even look like a yachting pant or anything like
Let's
that.
Go look.
Yeah,
Let's go
that
look.
Up. Like, pull
yachting
that up, Jamie.
Shorts. Dude, these are like the shorts we wear. Like, no joke. Like, they just kind of are. Let me go see if I can show them. Yeah, here they are. Like, those are pretty much our shorts.
I don't wear nothing like any of that. That is not what I wear. Hell no.
I mean, it kind of looks like some of mine, like maybe 2 pairs, maybe, of them, but that's it.
Man, it's like exercise shorts or something like that people are, I guess, wearing like normally or something. I don't know what the hell this is. I don't wear like dry fit clothes like unless I'm like exercising.
Well, no, not like dry fit, but the same cut, different material, but same like kind of like cut for the large part.
Maybe those shorts right there are too damn short. By the way, those right there. Like,
also,
I would not wear any of that short.
Also, I think this guy in this picture is now sterile. Like that's just too tight. Like there's something wrong. Dude, this guy's about to be like Lyndon Johnson on the phone with his tailor. I need you to give me an inch or 2 down there where the balls hang because they cut me. You know, like it's like I would not wear those, man. Like that has to be uncomfortable as hell. But beyond that, it also another weird thing, Matthew, that I was thinking, like it just hit me. We didn't see squat of LA, like at all. Like we were up in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica and West Hollywood. Well, Hollywood specifically. There is so much more that we just did not see. I don't know if that was for the better or the worst, but we didn't see any of it.
Yeah, we didn't see any of that. Also, by the way, I'm trying to read through the chat right here about people talking about the shorts. I see a lot of people saying LOL. I'm just saying, I don't know about y'all. I'm not wearing shorts that are that short like that. I've never worn any like that. I don't know about that look. I have seen some people wearing them. And every time I see them, like, what the hell? I'm like, that look is not quite right there. Like, your shorts should be a little bit longer than that. But that's just me, honestly. Like, I'm seeing some people laugh at it, but let's see here. Also, I'm trying to get a picture here of what I think that the Californians might think we look like based on AI, but I'm trying to source the image real quick. So let me see if I can get that. I'll be back with the Enforcer to see if I can get that image.
Okay, so in the meantime, let's see. Someone said those shorts would scream my dad is a lawyer. I mean, yeah, I guess. Like we didn't really have a choice growing up in what we dressed in. And we just kind of like once you get clothes, you just keep getting the same clothes. So we started off, I guess, being chosen the my dad's a lawyer clothes, and then we just kept with it because like I just keep reordering those pants. Like whenever the old ones wear out, I just get new ones. So yeah, I guess that would make sense. I don't like to think of it that way because I never go around being like, hey, my dad's a lawyer. Like I think we only pulled that out once. on the hot dog. Well, we didn't even pull it out once on the hot dog, man. We just, did something with that. But beyond that, Value Radar said, I'm just messing with you. No, I think it's actually honest. Like, I think that's an honest assessment right there as to where that trend of wearing clothes started with. We didn't really have a choice in that. That's just kind of like the clothes we were given growing up. So we just kind of stuck with it. But what do you got, Matthew?
Also, by the way, I got that picture. I think this is what the Californians think we look like, and maybe that's why the crazies didn't mess with us or something. Show them the picture. I sent it to you on Discord, by the way.
Oh, my Lord, Matthew. Is this an AI made it? Man, that ain't at all what we look like, man. Like, that ain't at all.
No.
Man,
this is my face, though. Like, that is my face, actually, which is, uncannily similar to how I actually look in real life. But, no, like, the clothes, I've never worn anything quite like that. But I did like the look, though. I might have to get a cowboy hat one day and go with it. But maybe it's what the Californians think we look like, something like this. We don't see it, but maybe they thought we looked like that.
Man, shoot. You ought to crop out the background in this picture, Matthew, and open up a gaming channel on the side and use this as your profile picture. Like, I think that'd really go over well.
No, man, I don't want to do that. That's cringe. Like, that's like hot dog man level, like narcissism type stuff.
Man, I mean, he did it, and I mean, it worked out well for him. He's working at 7-Eleven now. So I think it worked. But beyond that, let's see here. Let's see. Isn't that dang, I don't know what some people are talking about here. But anyways.
Wait a minute. Is that picture right there based on some type of movie that I'm seeing right here in the chat, by the way? Because I don't know that movie, but people are saying it repeatedly and stuff like that. I hope not. I hope that was not the inspiration behind that photo. I was not aware of that if it was.
I don't know either. And I also don't know the movie because some people are talking about some sort of a mountain. And the mountain's name sounds questionable. So let's see here. Looks as though that might be what the inspiration for the picture was. Matthew, we're gonna have to take Grok out back and put it down for that one because that
I don't even know which one came up with that. By the way, that was sent in by a fan, so I don't know who came up with that, but y'all better watch it.
So wait a minute, did the fan?
Oh my God, it is! What the hell, Miss Diesel? What the hell? Why'd you say that? I didn't even know that. Why didn't you warn me before I showed that or something? My God.
Well, I mean, there we have it. I guess.
What the hell?
Yeah, well, that's
So I want to know who had me at this point. Who the hell had me? I've never seen that movie, so I wouldn't even know what the hell this was from or nothing like that. I want to know who the hell had me at this point because I need to have a word with somebody.
I'll tell you this. Matthew. That I guess we're never gonna show fans sending in pictures again. Because that's an interesting one right there. I got to tell you, folks, that's new. I've never seen anyone do that one before. But I guess fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me twice. Look, you fool me once, you can't fool me again. But yeah, that's interesting. Man,
somebody's wilding out there. They got me showing stuff on the stream that ain't right. They got me showing it ain't right.
Someone's laughing like Goofy right now out there going, I got him. It's probably something like that out there. But I guess they did. I guess that's fair. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. Like, you fool me once, you can't fool me again. But anyways, let's see. And also Valley Raider said, wait, I can see you guys' pictures. I'm going to be honest really quickly for a minute. We never, well, I don't know about Matthew, but I can speak from my personal experience. If you send me anything with a link in it, I never click the links. I hate to say that for 3 years, I just never have opened links because that's the main way that people are able to get into your system is through phishing like that, where you click on a link that looks fine and then it's not. So I've never clicked on links that anyone sent. I'm just going to be honest here really quickly because people send me stuff and they're like, take a look at it, and I don't look at it because for all I know, it could be a phishing scam, and then our system's broken into, and then someone could hack into our channel and delete it or something else. So I just never open up links. I don't mean to kill anyone's joy if anyone's thinking, oh, I'm about to cook up something really cool and send them a link. I don't even open them. So, in people will sometimes push me. I'll be like, yeah, I'll look at that later. And then people will come back in 3 days and be like, hey, have you looked at it? And I don't want to tell them, nah, it might be a phishing scam thing, because then everyone thinks I'm accusing them of being a scammer or a hacker or something. So they'd be like, yeah, it's pretty interesting. But that's how we've avoided having our channel hijacked for 3 years, is just because we don't click. Well, I don't click external links to anything. But
You
anyways,
can't get me with that phishing scam, by the way. I have encrypted email, so if anybody tries to try that, I actually don't click on the links. Yeah, even with that in place, I don't click on them. But I also have some phishing stuff and encrypted email that prevents that from happening. But I still play it safe anyway, so it's nearly impossible to do that.
yeah, for the large part. And that's usually how people get into any system is through clicking on bad links. That's actually how I believe I heard recently that the Department of the what was it, the Department of the Treasury or something like that, Matthew, got hacked by the Chinese. It was through some sort of a phishing link thing as well, I believe.
That's usually what the case is. The easiest way to get into any system is to target the humans that are involved in the system. It's usually much harder to actually get into the actual software of anything around the country. In fact, most hacking teams, which actually are hired by private companies to test, and it's called pen testing on their systems, they will actually most of the time use human engineering of sorts, like sending people in that are really confident to simply say, hey, look, I'm the technician. I need to access your systems for a minute. And they'll go in there and get it. Or they will do the email phishing thing, and they'll send out a link to get access as well and get the IP and all kinds of other information to actually get into the system remotely. Most of the time, that's the way it works. But there are other ways like zero-day exploits and things like that to get into systems, but that's a little bit more uncommon.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing how hacking really works in real life. It has a lot more to do with, like you're saying, getting through the human element than actually breaking through a system. And I honestly think that hacking movies, like movies about hackers, would be a lot more interesting if they focused on the realistic side of how they do it instead of the fictitious side where they're like, I'm hacking into the mainframe right now on like a computer, because it's like it never happens that way. Like the Stuxnet thing didn't happen that way. Like nothing ever happened that way, I don't think. Like very rarely has it ever, but usually it starts with some sort of like a phishing scam. You know, there was something interesting, Matthew, where some guy, I forgot what he actually did, but there was a hacker back in the day, and he ended up getting a broken, it wasn't a broken in, it was like a managerial Xbox. It was like one of the first Xbox 360s, and it was made specifically for the people at the Xbox studio that run that company to work and manage stuff with. And so it had all of the admin passwords in this Xbox, and it had been thrown in the trash, and for some reason this dude found it. And he was able to get into Xbox and literally go through all of their financial information and things because all of the passwords had been auto-saved into that 360. So he was able to access anyone in the company's account and then email through it and all that stuff. It was really wild. I think he ended up I don't know if I'm remembering the story. He ended up defrauding Xbox along the way for hundreds of thousands of dollars that he was just cashing out, and no one even knew anything until it was too late, and then they found out that someone had pretty much broken into the system and was just literally robbing their company blind. So it was like, that was wild. And then also I think the kid did something else where he messed with the Department of Defense, which was, you know, like messing with Xbox is obviously not a good thing and criminal. But messing with the Department of Defense is like criminal on another level, because if you piss those people off, they are going to come down on you nice and good. But he did it, and I think that he's currently in prison for like 20 or something years, I believe.
The truth of the situation is, if somebody is trained well enough and they're well equipped with skills to be able to hack into something like the Department of Defense, those people most of the time are never caught unless it's an inside job. Like, for example, if it's somebody in the military that accessed the system, and then maybe there's a record of them accessing the system illegally, they would catch them in that scenario. But most of the time, if you're advanced enough to actually get in there on your own without having an inside pass to the system, they probably never get caught because they're pretty damn skilled.
I forgot what it was. Wait a minute, hang on. I remember how he got into the Department of Defense. It was actually through the Xbox. Because, interestingly enough, if I'm remembering the story right, Xbox was actually working on a Department of Defense program where they could use the Xbox for virtual reality training. And this was way back before virtual reality really started to make it into the public. And so there was a Department of Defense password and username in there, and it turns out that the password was just recycled by the Department of Defense employee that was, you know, on that Xbox at the Xbox company, and he actually was able to use that to log into the secured, it was some sort of a secured site that the Department of Defense used, and then he was able to get into the system through that. And then I think, if I remember correctly, in that email, someone had sent him an email, like the DoD employee's accounts email, and the email was saved that had a whole bunch of other people's emails and passwords in it for that website. So then he did the same thing to them that he was pretty much doing to Xbox, and he was just phishing the DoD for all kinds of information. And so they came down on him. I think when it all ended, they came down on him for both the Xbox thing and the DoD thing, and he escaped to the Czech Republic, or he's in prison now for about 20 years. I forgot which one it was. But I don't know.
They both sound equally bad almost.
What, going to the Czech Republic? I mean, that's not that bad.
That's a joke.
Yeah, I was about to be like, dude, the Czech Republic isn't bad. It's pretty cool. You know, like they have Prague, and that's like it. But beyond that, I'm just kidding, by the way. There's a lot of cool stuff in the Czech Republic. But anyways, with that, I hope that was a fun little story for all of y'all. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. So also another shout out here. Nasred just threw in a $100 donation and brought us up to $4,405 raised. Huge shout out to Nasred for that support of the fundraiser. Also, someone said Proton Mail. That's personally what I use. That's a really good encrypted program right there. Not sponsored by them, by the way, but they have a pretty good encryption system for their email, and a lot of people use it. In fact, a lot of people that are journalists that have sort of like more covert sources, they'll typically use Proton Mail end to end for encryption, so that way they don't get caught with whatever they're doing. But that's just a word on the street. But moving on here to our next question from the live chat. This one goes to... Let's see here. This one goes to Jay Bagwell, who said, what was your opinion of the AI translation from the interview? And I thought it was amazing. And Jay, I didn't notice that, by the way. They were using the AI. At first, I was like, why are their mouths not matching up to what they're saying? And then I'm like, okay, it's an AI that's, dubbing over their language. So it made sense then. But I would say it was actually pretty good. Like, rather than the weird effect of the mouse not moving right, it was actually pretty on point with their voices. And we've actually played with that software before. You can mimic anybody's voice, including my own, Andrew's voice, anybody's, and basically type out what you want them to say, and it sounds just like them. And it looks like they use the exact same software for that. So that was an actually pretty productive use of it. For the first time I've ever seen actually used in that capacity. So I thought it was pretty neat. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it was actually pretty cool. It was uncanny valley though, a little bit, with how the like mouths weren't really matching up with the words. Like that was the part where I was like, wait a minute, is this audio like faked or something? And then I noticed that it was the AI subtitles. So I was like, oh, that's wild. But it actually did sound pretty good. It sounded just like Zelensky and Friedman. And it was easily understandable in English as well, and had the same inflections and emotions in it for the large part that they had in the real audio, I'm supposing, because I haven't actually heard the real audio. But beyond that, I would say it actually was pretty good. It was a very interesting way to use AI, and I think it was a very good application of it, at least practically. So with that, I hope that does address that well, J Bagwell. Great question, by the way, and good to have a question from you tonight. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Bo, my boy Bo. And Bo says, how far do you think Russia is from a USSR, Afghanistan-style economic defeat? Could it be perhaps years or months?
I would say it's really hard to tell because of folks wanting us to crystal ball on this channel, which, no blame on anyone for wanting us to, but we always know that it's going to be heavily inaccurate. We have assumed that the Russian Federation will financially collapse pretty much every year since year one of the war, and they haven't yet. So it's really hard to tell what point will they reach where they face an economic collapse. It's really, really hard to tell. And at this point, I don't even really like crystal balling about it, because I know that our answer has a 99% chance of being wrong. But with that in mind, I have a feeling that, considering that we have to kind of crystal ball here, that give it 2 years and the economy just cannot survive. It is a free market economy, sort of, and because of that, a economic collapse eventually will have to happen that's devastating enough that will cause the economy to implode. So I would say give it 2 years time, and by then it will have to have exploded if we are crystal balling about this. Probably might still be wrong, might not ever really collapse like that, but I have a feeling it's eventually coming around the corner, because the ruble is inflating just out of control at this point. Let me go see if I can show you that again. They are starting to stabilize it a little bit, but they're stabilizing it at the highest point it's ever been in history, outside of the spike at the beginning of the war. So with that in mind, I just don't really think there's a lot of a way that they can recover the economy at this point. I have a feeling it's most likely just going to explode and go out of control. They give it a year or two time from now. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next question here goes to Tikas, who says, do you think the mandatory evacuation around that area of Bolshoi, what's the place called?
Bolshoi Soldatsky.
Yeah, is that mandatory evacuation due to some kind of strategy from Russia to be able to yap about using a nuke in the Kursk region and to avoid civilian casualties?
It's a little unlikely. They have conducted mandatory evacuations in the Gerki area in southern Kursk and did not use a tactical nuclear weapon, and they also did the same thing around the Koronivo area. Beyond that, the rest of them were voluntary evacuations, but beyond that, I would doubt that it's going to be the pretense to use a tactical nuclear weapon. I have a feeling that the frontline situation may be collapsing that badly, where they believe that that would be a necessary measure to make, but I have a feeling that the use of a tactical nuclear weapon and the threat of that is still a fairly low percentage. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Jeff Alley. And Jeff asked a question here. He said, what is your best guess on how much longer Putin's gonna remain in power?
I have a feeling that he's probably going to remain in power as long as the economy survives. So his survival is really dependent on the Russian economy. If the Russian economy collapses, no one in Russia has an incentive anymore to keep Putin in power. He ran the economy into the ground at that point. He's going to continue running it into the ground, and no one's going to stand for that at that point. The only person who would stand for that is Putin himself, and unlike others, and some people are saying this, Putin has pretty much an indomitable control over Russia, much like Kim Jong-un has over North Korea. The situation in North Korea is totally different than the one in Russia. In Russia, Putin has never conducted a full-fledged purge. He's conducted purges. People have been thrown out of windows. But it's nothing like the Great Purge of Stalin or the purges that Kim Il-sung conducted under his leadership that installed the Kim dynasty as the leaders of North Korea from that point on. Nothing like that's happened under Putin's rule. So there is enough there. There is fear there to keep people in line. But there isn't as much fear as, say, in North Korea. So there is a chance that people would throw him out if the economy imploded. So I would say that he's probably going to be around, if the war keeps on going, as long as it possibly could, probably for the next 2 years until the economy implodes, and then there will probably be some sort of massive civil unrest to occur, and some military officials who would want to take advantage of that civil unrest will probably stage a coup against Putin. And considering that the military and the public would not be on Putin's side, he is practically powerless at that point. He doesn't have command of the nuclear arsenal, he doesn't have the command of the armed forces, and he doesn't have the loyalty of the citizenry. So with that in mind, he would be forced to leave. Some people say he does have control over the oligarchs. The oligarchs really do not matter. As far as I'm concerned, they don't really matter in any consequential way, either against Putin or for him, because they only exist because of the Russian central government. So whoever is controlling the Russian central government has the power over the oligarchs. So they're completely inconsequential in a decision-making realm. So if Putin was overthrown and some military junta came in control of Russia and then they brought forward some new form of a government, they would be in control of the oligarchs. The oligarchs are not in control of the Russian government. The Russian government is in control of them, and those people only exist by the benevolence of the Russian government, and really by an extent, the Russian people. Because the Russian people rose up against Putin, and the military came in, and then the military wanted to kill all these oligarchs. The military is going to kill them, and they've got the backing of the public to do it as well. So that's kind of the thing to me with the oligarchs, is that they have really no impact at all on Russian decision-making, for good or for bad. They're just kind of like these people that exist. That's a little different back in the past, but nowadays, because of Putin's selective throwing people out of windows kind of an ordeal, it's shown that they have no power. Because if they had power, the first oligarch that got thrown out of a window would have been enough to have all the other oligarchs rise up and throw out Putin if they actually held the power in the country, and they just don't. And that clearly started to show that the oligarchs were just powerless figureheads for the large part of independent parts of the Russian economy that are controlled largely by Putin himself, and these are the people who are pretty much just as managers, and they make a good deal of money just by being the managers of these companies. But with that, I hope that it's really the best way I could explain it. It's kind of like Chinese independent companies like Temu or Alibaba, because all of those guys, they look like they're a part of some sort of a free enterprise, but that enterprise is completely run and managed by the Chinese Communist Party, and those people just happen to be the front men who look like the CEOs of these companies. But just like Jack Ma, if you say anything against the CCP, they will just remove you from the position and make you disappear and put a new person in your place. And that was the end of the story. So that's what I'm largely thinking is the same thing with Russia. Those people are inconsequential. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next question here. This one goes to Leonce Pierre, and he said, according to a North Korean defector, the majority of their training was taken up with foraging for food to feed themselves. And do you think they are being treated better by the Russians? Also, by the way, Enforcer, I'm not sure if you heard this as well, but Zelensky actually confirmed today in his interview that the Russians are actively defacing the North Koreans after they are dead. And they're apparently actually burning their faces. That is what Zelensky said today. He actually confirmed that they are doing it to hide the identity of the North Koreans after they are killed in battle. So that's quite heinous to hear as well. They're doing that in addition to throwing them out there like human fodder at the same time. But what do you think? Are the North Koreans being treated better by the Russians, or what do you think?
I would say that they're probably being treated better by the Russians. Not that the Russians are any humanitarians or anything. It's just that there's no way you can be treated worse than living in North Korea. And also, the story that they forage for food is true. That's been accounted for by a lot of defectors, including the one that I was listening to, who said that they only got 3 bullets per year in marksmanship training as their allotment. And he said no one even knew who was the best shot because they didn't even get enough shots ever to make a grouping to figure it out, so no one even knew. But anyways, moving on from that, he also said that foraging was a large deal in the KPA, which stands for the Korean People's Army, which is the army of the Democratic Republic of Korea, or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. But beyond that, he said that foraging was a big part because the average military the average military unit in North Korea doesn't actually get a proper food allotment that is enough to sustain a grown adult. So they have to take up to foraging to try and figure out how to make up that calorie deficiency. It's a pretty wild thing. Another thing that the defector said is that outside of Pyongyang, and there's very few military units in Pyongyang, they're practically the elite, and then they're relegated and forced to stay within the city of Pyongyang. They're not allowed to leave the city unless if it's under special military orders, which is very rare for that to be issued. But beyond that, he said that the provincial military units, which make up the bulk of the country, they also did not have showers at all. Like, the barracks were just filled with people that were reeking because they would not shower for 2 straight weeks. So then on the second week, the second and fourth week of every month, they would get all of the soldiers and they would march them in formation to the nearest river or stream, and then they would wash all of their clothes in that river, and they'd also wash themselves. They were not allotted soap. So, like, they were pretty much just, like, taking a bird bath practically, just, like, getting in the water. I'm just trying to wash off the stench and filth that way in the dirty industrial water in all of Korea's rivers. So it's not really ideal kinds of circumstances. And, some people who are less mentally inclined may say something like, oh, you're real hardcore in the military, you don't need a shower. And, like, those people have probably never even considered that morale is, like, a big thing. Because if you're not eating enough, and you're not even showering, and you're living like shit, and you don't even get toilet paper, you're having to wipe your ass with a leaf, like, your morale is going to be pretty low. Like, if that's just your standard average living style or living conditions, morale is going to be wildly low. Because like North Koreans, a lot of North Koreans live like that, crazily enough. That's their average life. But at the same time, y'all all know that they know that there's better. Because one thing that all North Koreans have? They have a television, and for a few hours every day when the electricity's on, North Korea runs their state televised programs. And a lot of those are based around the lives of the people in Pyongyang. So everyone in the provinces knows what the life in Pyongyang looks like, and it looks way better than theirs. They're not wiping their ass with a leaf, and they're not sitting there foraging for food all day, and they're also showering in showers, not bathing in rivers. So the morale has to be low. Like, that's what I'd assume. It has to be low, because they're living in abhorrent conditions. But beyond that, the Russians are treating them better, because if they're showering in a shower, that's already an automatic improvement. Even if it's a crappy shower or a communal shower, that's an improvement over a river. If they have toilet paper, that's a massive improvement as well. And I'd assume that the Russians are probably giving them toilet paper. If they are getting their basic minimum caloric intake as a grown adult, that is a massive improvement as well, because even in North Korea, they were not getting their average allotment of food. So probably the Russians are treating them better just because they're giving them the bare minimum, and that's even more than what the DPRK gave them while in Korea. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Little Bear, who says, I've seen columns of Ukraine hardware going into Kursk, and how did Ukraine get through the Russian minefield so quick?
That is an interesting question if we're speaking about Kursk in particular. We don't think that they've actually had time to create minefields. The front line has been active enough and moving enough throughout the whole time, either forwards or backwards, that the Russians have never really had enough time to sit in place to build minefields. So that's why they're kind of making it through really quickly, is because we're generally assuming that if there are any minefields, they're very scant or non-existent. Also, another thing is that we don't know where the North Korean equipment is going. We've seen an insane amount of Koksan SPGs of that specific variety being transported into Western Russia. I've never seen where they've gone, and we've never seen one destroyed in combat yet. So we don't know where the North Korean equipment is, but for the answer with the minefields, they're making them through probably because they don't exist yet. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second and last question of the night.
All right, and this one is going to go to Creation, who says, will we see a repeat of the success of the Kharkiv offensive again?
I'm doubting it. We probably will see that they make a good amount of offensive ground. I would assume they probably make it up to Lyuba-Movka, up the R200 highway, but I do not believe that we're going to be seeing any kind of a major strategic success like the capture of the large population areas within the Kursk Oblast. I have a feeling that's still going to be largely unlikely. The offensive force that Ukraine has is not sufficient enough to hold that area of ground if they were able to take it, and urban fighting would be wildly difficult with the force they have available, and also due to the terrain surrounding the city of Kursk and the difficulty of encircling the city. So for these reasons, I largely would say that I don't think we're going to see something as wildly successful as the Kharkiv offensive. Those were the battle of the frontier days. We kind of have to throw that stuff out of the window now. That was a totally different time in the conflict. It was a very fluid time. Front lines were moving and every which way really easily. And so the Ukrainians and the Russians back then were actually able to claim some pretty significant strategic successes without really having to sit there and slug it out for months on end. It could just be done in a matter of days, weeks, or maybe even a month or two. But nowadays, with how the war is going on, it's almost like World War I. We usually measure the gains in just mere in mere yards most of the time in most fronts. So with that, a major success these days isn't a Kharkiv counteroffensive success. It actually would just be reaching Lyuba-Movka. That would be considered a massive success because that would almost double the amount of land that the Ukrainians are currently controlling and would be considered a major loss for the Russian Federation, considering the inactive nature of the current front lines as they exist throughout the entirety of the conflict. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
All right, and that viewer is Purple Gerbil, who said, are there redundant systems to the backup, or excuse me, to back up the cable cuts that are happening?
Yes. There are backups. We just have secondary and tertiary cables that usually travel through these areas through different paths. So while one cable can be cut out, we do have the backups. The issue is, however, is that we could have pretty much in a major sense connection throttling, because with all of the cables we had, the communication system was working fine and the load was distributed equally amongst the three links, if we're saying that there's three. But when one is cut out, that means that the same load of information is having to be transmitted now on 2 cables instead of 3. And this means that the load that the surviving cables are carrying is higher than it was before. And if another cable's knocked out, a single cable may not be able to maintain the load that all 3 cables were maintaining before. So it does end up creating a communications bottleneck, but it is manageable, at least at this time, from what we're understanding. We're not hearing that there's any major communication cutouts or shortages at the moment, but it is still a tenuous situation, because if our fail-safes start to be jeopardized through actions like these around Taiwan and in the Baltic, we could see that this starts to pose a major a major strategical error in the future if our fail-safes or our backups are to be knocked out. So I hope that answers that question the best I can, and we're going to now be rounding out tonight's stream. And what a stream it has been. It's been 3 hours and 10 minutes long, and this is wildly long for a Sunday night fundraiser. They're usually only 2.5 hours long, but I still thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. 78,000 people have been here from beginning to end, and crazily enough, about 11,000 people were here exactly tonight at the peak. And I gotta thank so many people for having patience and a lot of understanding during these more erratic schedule times, where some days we're on like our normal days and then we just take a day off or something like that. I hate to do that. The cough is rough sometimes. Yesterday I was doing nothing and I was not coughing, and then Matthew asked me, how's the cough doing? And as soon as I started talking to him, I started coughing like a lunatic. And for some reason talking at that point started me coughing. Tonight it hasn't been that bad, and I hope that when we come back on air on Tuesday to start our next streaming week, the cough will largely be going away. For some reason tonight, it kind of feels like it is. Like I'm coughing still here and there, but I'm not coughing like a fiend, like like I have been. So hopefully this is getting towards the latter end of it, because it's been going on for over 2 weeks at this point. So I'm hoping that eventually this is getting towards the end of the line. But beyond that, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all. Now I'm going to start coughing after I said I wasn't coughing that much, but hopefully we will see you all tomorrow for a short war summary. If there is news to be made tomorrow, for one of the first times in weeks, y'all are going to be hearing from me. Because I've already told... Because I've already told Matthew that if there is news to be made tomorrow, I'm going to be making the video so that way I can get back into the rhythm like that we have of alternating days and doing the short war videos one day after the other. So hopefully I'll be able to do that.
I got in such a rhythm of doing those things too. That's a damn shame.
Man, you were pumping them out too. Like it was just like one every day. I was like, dang, he's getting to it. But still, if there is news to be made tomorrow, I will be making it, and if not, y'all will see us tomorrow. Well, y'all will actually see us on Tuesday, either in the short war video earlier on in the day, which will be made by Matthew because it'll be Tuesday, or y'all will see both of us on that stream that night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope that y'all had a great night. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, once again, thank you all for another great stream tonight. Of course, a very good Sunday night fundraiser stream with over $4,450 being raised, which is very, very good. And once again, another successful fundraiser, of course. And thank you all once again for that. And also, almost 80,000 people joined us by the end, so another large stream as well. And with that, folks, we will see you all on Tuesday night. And maybe the Enforcer will be making a video tomorrow. I imagine there will be news to cover for certain. Things are going quite crazy right now. So you'll probably be hearing from him, or if he's coughing, you might be hearing from me once again. But with that, thank you all once again. Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. Get some rest, and I'll see you all on Twitter in the meantime. And with that, good night.
Some